All right. We are officially live. We are back for question period and House of Commons proceedings. We've had a long break. We've had about a week. Had a week to let the scripts be rewritten. A week to allow the MPs to come together and talk about how they're going to screw Canadians even further. But we got some interesting news here before we get into House of Commons proceedings. I just want to welcome everybody back after a week break. Like I said, it's been interesting. A lot of crazy stuff has been happening. First things first, though. First reading. The Trump cabinet really, really hates Trudeau. Wow. Join the crew. Join the gang of people who despise Trudeau. It's international at this point. It is worldwide. Canada has been made fun of numerous times due to Trudeau's leadership and his lack of care for Canadians. US administrations usually don't have strong opinions about Canada. Not this time. We take a little scroll down here. It does say, where was I reading this before? As Trump fills out his cabinet, it's becoming clear that his appointees have vocal opinions on Canadian politics and see the government of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau as the emblem of everything they oppose. The emblem, the poster child, if you would, of everything the Trump cabinet despises, wants to annihilate, essentially, in the United States. Crazy stuff. I mean, there's been a lot of articles coming out. You know, you've seen it from the first term with Trump. Not a lot of good things happened between him and Trudeau. Trump actually ignored Trudeau numerous times because Trudeau is just a weak leader. He doesn't have a voice. You saw the videos of the old G20 summit meetings where everybody was huddled around Trump and Trudeau was standing on the outside looking in, being absolutely ignored. He wasn't even there to the rest of the G20 leaders. And I've said it before, the exact same thing is going to happen again. Trump has come back. Second term, Trudeau, still incompetent, still weak, still not a great leader. And it's going to be even worse. I said it in the video yesterday. 2025 is going to be an insane year for Canada. Trump is going to be pushing really hard on us to be paying forward on a lot of things. We have a lot of issues here to fix. And it's also an election year. So who knows what's going to happen next year? It'll be very interesting at the very least. This is coming from the Globe and Mail. More than half of Canadians say Trudeau should be replaced, as Liberal Party leader polls show. Yeah, people have been saying this for years now. People have been saying this for a very long time. And even the mainstream media, they've been running a lot on Trudeau here. They've been bashing the ever-living hell out of him, and rightfully so. It's just a matter of time that the mainstream media actually kind of got a quarter of a brain, maybe even an eighth of a brain, and started reporting legitimate news over just whatever BS fits their narrative. And I did talk about this also yesterday in the video. Biden lifts ban on Ukraine using US weapons to strike deeper into Russia. You know, you'd think they would want to de-escalate the situation, that they would want to stop the war happening over there. But guess what? No, actually, the exact opposite. Biden's like, take our rockets. By the way, these are not nuclear weapons. These are just, I believe, CMs or whatever. I don't know the exact name of them, but these are warheads of a very lethal variety here that are going to be getting launched deep into Russia with the U.S. name strapped on the side of them. We keep giving Ukraine money, weaponry to fight an endless war that is not going to end, while Canadians here are suffering. And it's just a brutal time right now to be Canadian. And I only hope the future is a lot better than what we have right now. Kind of mixing in between here with the US and Canada. It's going to be a crazy situation within the next couple years, depending on exactly what happens. I really hope Trudeau does not get back into power, because if he does, I don't even know what to say at this point. I don't know who would even want to vote for him. I really don't. Okay, let's get into the House of Commons proceedings. Thank you all for joining me today.
From self-interested liberals who literally are trying to change the law so that the election can be a week later, knowing that they're going to lose their seats, so that they can get their pensions. That's what their preoccupation is. Looking after themselves, not looking after Canadians. It's government by apology and photo op is what they've done for 9 years. And Canadians are paying the price. What haven't they broken? They broke housing in our country. They broke our immigration system. It's unbelievable. They broke our food banks. Food bank use has doubled. They're running out of food. They have to extend their hours, because when you have 25% of Canadians who are depending on food banks, and the unemployment rate is under 6.5%, well, that's an awful lot of people who are working, who have to rely on the food bank to feed themselves. But it's worse than that. I'm hearing from food banks and meeting folks who have to get to the food bank between shifts at their 2 jobs, which aren't enough to pay the bills. So they've got to go from their first job, go to the food bank, get enough food to feed themselves and their family, and then go back to work at their next job. That's the legacy of this government after 9 years. But who are they looking out for? Well, it's not Canadians. It's not Canadians who are struggling to afford a meal, to heat their homes, or to buy their first home. They're abandoning Canadians in their time of need. And when we put forward common sense solutions, like taking the GST off of new home constructions under $1 million, they won't do it. Why? Well, first of all, it would increase housing supply by about 30,000 homes a year. It'd save Canadians tens of thousands of dollars on the purchase of those homes. And that's not what they're interested in. Government by photo op and by apology. But man, do they have a lot to be sorry for. And not to tell Canadians that they should be sorry, which they also like to do. They should be standing up and apologizing. Because it's shameful what we've seen. A minister of the Crown serving in the Liberal government connected to cocaine traffickers, his business. And that connection, while he was in cabinet, we're not talking about something from 20 years ago. This is currently involved. And the only reason he's not an owner of the business anymore, because he collapsed his shares on the eve of his appearance at cabinet to testify about his involvement with these fraudsters and hucksters. It is obscene. It is obscene what goes on with those Liberals and that Liberal Prime Minister after 9 years. But I have great news for Canadians. That the scandal and mismanagement and corruption that we're seeing over there today, that Canadians have now come to get used to, that has them feeling, it's been normalized, it has them feeling like there's no hope. Well, life wasn't like this before that Liberal Prime Minister and that NDP Liberal government, and it's not going to be like it after him.
We can only hope.
There's no political opportunity that these Liberals won't take to help advantage themselves, and it does not seem to faze them if it disenfranchises or disadvantages Canadians in the process. But you really have to wonder without having to drill down into any of the waste in the government programs that they've put on that just, again, build more bureaucracy but do nothing to help Canadians, like their supposed solutions for housing that have driven down housing starts but driven up bureaucracy, or the tens of millions of dollars on their failed confiscation with compensation scheme, their so-called gun buyback to give people money for things that the government never owned. Meanwhile, you have police unions across the country, including today the Toronto Police Association, calling on the government, red circling these Liberals for the chaos and disorder on the streets. And these Liberals will say, oh, those are Conservatives and conservative lobby groups. It's the largest police association, the largest police union in the country is calling them out. But they are so blinded by their own self-interest that they just can't get out of their own way. And how they can stand up in here today and defend the indefensible, that Liberal minister from Edmonton who refuses to resign, and they also, and he won't stand up. He won't stand up today to offer his resignation or an apology on the floor of the House of Commons, though Canadians deserve a lot more than that. He should have been fired. And I've got to tell you, it seems like they don't have the moral clarity, or the intestinal fortitude to do the right thing and to make sure that Liberal minister, that minister from Edmonton, doesn't continue to serve in cabinet and represent their party and their prime minister. But they're going to have a rude awakening when Canadians get that carbon tax election, because common sense Conservatives will demonstrate our plan to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime, especially the crime from those criminals in the front bench and the back benches across the way.
Questions and comments. Councillor Kamal-Kennedy, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Speaker, you'll notice that at the very end, and I think it speaks volumes, the member gets the gold star because he carried the 4 election platform issues. He knows the slogans. They know the slogans. They have the bumper stickers. They're all ready to go. There's no doubt about that. So he gets the gold star for that. And that's the premise as to why it is they want to speak, Mr. Speaker. No matter what it is that the member tries to say, he wants to go back to the economy. I would love to debate the issue of the economy. I'd love to talk about the issue of housing. Wouldn't it be nice to be talking about the fall economic statement or a number of the legislations, not to mention the opposition days. But instead of doing that, Mr. Speaker, they want to have this multi-million-dollar game being played. The motion is very simple. It's to call an individual before the bar. They've moved an amendment. They will talk and talk and talk and talk. They'll put up 100 speakers. We might put up 2 or 3, possibly, Mr. Speaker. Maybe 2 or 3. The question is, why is the Conservative Party, beside wanting to get their gold stars, putting up so many speakers in order to be able to prevent Canadians from being able to witness a House of Commons that's more functional, as opposed to this opposition that wants to demonstrate that they can use their weight to demonstrate that they can paralyze the House of Commons?
Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Brito Lakes.
Why does that Liberal keep standing up and defending the indefensible? It's a member of his caucus, a member of cabinet that he's defending, who came before committee and said one thing when the other thing was actually true, who said he was Indigenous in order to win government contracts, but it wasn't true. His business is sharing business resources with cocaine traffickers.
Not a good look.
That's who.
Not a
who that
good
Liberal
look. Yeah,
MP is
you
standing
don't
up
say.
and defending. And he says that they'll stand up 3 people. We know he's going to get up as often as he can to defend the indefensible. But I got to tell you, the impacts of this government's economic vandalism and mismanagement is directly related to the type of people that they've put into these senior positions. When the experience is coming from cocaine trafficker adjacent ministers, maybe they should take a good look in the mirror, and they should have their prime minister fire that failure of a minister, or better yet, call a carbon tax election.
Good idea.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Thérèse de Blainville. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've just come back from a riding week, which was beneficial for us as elected officials. And now our Canadians are wondering what's happening in the House. The answer is simple: nothing. Not because the questions we're debating here aren't important. It's because they're using parliamentary power to extend a debate, which is paralyzing government. And then there's also a government that is paralyzing the government. It was accusing others of doing that, but it's doing absolutely nothing to get out of the situation because it may suit them. So as elected officials who value our democracy, I'd like to ask my colleague a question. These are serious accusations with respect to Randy, and we're talking about the Minister of Employment.
We're still talking about
and
Randy.
Official languages. So, what other mechanisms could we use to shed light on this topic, which already went before the Ethics Committee? How come there's a question of privilege which will paralyze the House? I'm not sure how much longer, but the honourable member for Leeds Grenville Islands.
This issue is incredibly important. This is why the Ethics Committee has called for that Liberal minister from Edmonton to come back before the Ethics Committee to see if we can get a third version of his truth, or maybe get to the actual facts of the matter. It's a real problem when you have someone come before a parliamentary committee, a minister come before committee, and you have to bring them back because you've learned that evidence demonstrates that what they said at committee was not true. So we have to hear from the minister at committee, and of course we need to have Mr. Anderson come before the House to answer questions and to answer for his contempt. But this is a scandal that goes right to the Prime Minister's office. When that Prime Minister is supporting the minister from Edmonton, that Liberal minister from Edmonton, who is involved in this, this business venture, had an ongoing involvement with, like the National Post says today, cabinet minister's firm shared mailing address with person named in cocaine busts, and that same minister being at the cabinet table, well, his business that he owned a 50% share in was winning government contracts. They won a contract with Elections Canada. What an advantage that he gets. If claiming that he was Indigenous when he's not, for Indigenous-only contracts, wasn't enough of an advantage to put him at and to disadvantage Canadians, he also is sitting at the cabinet table. I wonder if that weighs into anyone's decisions in government when they're deciding which vendor to pick, if one of the vendors sits around the cabinet table.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Windsor West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm glad my colleague opened up such a wide area of topics, but in particular with regards to sitting at the cabinet table. I want him to tell us the official Conservative policy now on his leader and Stephen Harper before him closing veterans' offices, including the one in Windsor, Ontario, from our veterans. What's their official position now on the actual cabinet decision that actually locked the doors, fired workers, and threw veterans to the streets on the services that they needed? What's his official position now, and what will Windsor West residents expect in the future about closing veterans officers after they recruited veterans off the streets to go to Afghanistan and all the other different wars before that? What's the official Conservative response to his current leader at the cabinet table, as you just referenced right now, responsibility of actually closing veterans offices?
Oh, we lost the CPAC stream. Oh,
to
no, there we go.
His current leader at the cabinet table, as you just referenced right now, responsibility.
Come on, CPAC, don't fail on us now. Oh my.
To his current
Starting off early.
Cabinet table, as you just referenced right now, responsibility of actually closing veterans' offices. For the response.
Wow. I have no idea what's going on here. Let's do a little refresh.
Future about closing veterans officers after they recruited veterans off the streets to go to Afghanistan.
I think the stream may have went down. It's just repeating the same thing.
Conservative response to his current leader at the cabinet table, as you just referenced right now, responsibility.
Wow. I have no idea what's happening to the CPAC stream.
It's a real shame that today Canadians who voted for NDP members, they see that those NDP members, a Liberal government.
It is completely out of sync. All right, guys, hold on. Something is going on with the CPAC live site right now. Oh, wow, this is really bad. I've never seen this happen before. It typically runs completely smooth.
Now, on the actual cabinet decision that actually locked the doors, fired workers, and threw veterans to the streets on the services that they needed. What's his official position now, and what will Windsor West residents expect in the future about closing veterans officers after they recruited veterans off the street?
Okay, so there's something currently wrong with the actual CPAC live feed. They have gone down. The actual House of Commons live feed has shut down temporarily. I don't know what is going on. CPAC trying to brainwash us. It's the True Doom censorship. Yes. Yes, I believe it is. I've actually never seen this happen before. This is something completely out of the blue. The website is completely down. Wow. Wow, this is a first. This is a first. There's no audio coming through. It's completely out of sync. Is this working? Oh, wow. The entire CPAC site is down. Okay. Yeah, there is no audio coming through on any feed. The feeds keep crashing. Let's see if we can go back to the main page here. Wow, okay, this has never happened before, ladies and gentlemen. At least not in the few months that I've been covering it. Not allowed to hear. No, taxpayer dollars going to something good here, clearly. Greg muted it again. Greg hit the perma mute button, but this time he has permanently muted the entire live stream. Wow, this is a first, guys. Let's see if even the committee is working. In committee from House of Commons on Natural Resources is also down. Oh, maybe not. But there's no volume coming through. There's no audio coming through on any of the feeds right now. Don't know why. Wow, this is a first, guys. This is just completely thrown a wrench into the entire system. What is going on here? Come on, guys, get your stuff together. Are they on YouTube? Is it working on YouTube? Okay, we're back. We have a feed again, but there's still no audio. No, we actually aren't back. I wonder if they are getting DDoSed, or if there is just something wrong with the internet on their side. You guys are just joining us right now. The House of Commons is having some issues streaming just the proceedings, the regular House proceedings. I hope this doesn't continue into question period, because I really would like to see what everybody is going to be arguing today. This is a first, like I said. I was not expecting this to happen. There is no live feed anywhere else for the Canadian government. Let's see if other YouTubers are having the same issues or not.
In the Prime Minister.
No, I guess they're not. I don't know where the hell they're watching it from. Interesting. Wow, okay. I'm sure it'll work when the Liberals speak. CPAC brought to you by Fisher Price Audiovisual Services. Yeah, Toys R Us, pretty much. Toys R Us services at its finest. Guys, I don't even know what the actual hell is going on here. Alright, we're gonna do this. I hate to do this,
They're running
but
out of food. This is in the newspapers.
I'm gonna restream another stream.
Running dry.
Another
This is
YouTube
a country
stream.
where in big cities,
Just for
and
now
in
until the
regions,
CPAC site
violent
pops
crime
back up, because
has
I don't know what's going on with that.
increased by 250% since 2015. And the priority of this Prime Minister and his cabinet is what? It's to protect the Minister of Foreign Languages to help have a little file job here, despite about everything that happened.
Alright, we're back. That was
with
weird.
The
That was really weird.
responsible for official languages. The other Randy.
What's even more weird is that they continued the proceedings. Obviously, they didn't know that the feed shut down, but they continued speaking as if nothing happened. We missed out.
When you look at all the press clippings since June, if you look at the headlines, just the headlines, Mr. Speaker, and I think it's important for Canadians to see how this situation evolved when it comes to the Minister for Official Languages. The Minister, I'll begin with the Francophone press because there are fewer articles, but you'll see that there's a correlation with the rest of my speech. On June 27th, the first article that talked about this, they talked about the background of the minister in question. On July 5th, Radio Canada, it says the minister was exonerated by an ethics review, but not by the opposition. October 2nd, the minister's dealings are being debated again in Le Droit. And then November 15th, the minister apologized for being vague about his Indigenous identity. So that's it. So for Francophones watching and listening, people following federal politics, it looks like a little story, not very significant. Why is the House of Commons spending so much time talking about the Minister for Official Languages background? But if you look at the English press, Mr. Speaker, since June 4th, and I'll give you the titles in English.
Le 4 juin, Global News dit, text from Randy raised questions about minister's role at compagnie while in office.
So here we learn that there were text messages involving the other Randy. I'll say it that way because we're not allowed to name any minister. So this other Randy. So this raises issues about the role of the Minister for Official Languages. July 16th now.
Former partner in a medical supply company has ties to an Edmonton woman who was detained in a massive cocaine bust in Dominican Republic in April 2022. Le 16.
So that was July 16th in Global News. July 17th.
Hearing about Liberal minister, businesses exec admits he lied to a reporter. Ça, c'est global.
Yeah, it's weird that, they can't specifically call out the MPs involved and they have to keep their names silent or secret. So he just says the other Randy. Like, come on, man.
Mr. Stephen Anderson, the individual who refused to answer questions and who is the subject of the question of privilege we're debating here and now. So his partner admitted that he lied to journalists in July 17th. On July 30th,
Le ministre des Affaires.
The Minister of Official Languages.
Testimony to Ethics Committee. On apprend
So here we learn that basically what the minister said at committee was not quite accurate when compared to the facts. So that was July 30th. On August 15th, Global News.
new Randy text leads to third ethics probe into Boissonneau business dealing. Le ministre des Affaires étrangères. Désolé, Monsieur le Président.
Minister of Foreign Affairs at the time. It's complicated when a person wears so many hats. It's hard not to get mixed up. And obviously, I can't name the individual in question. So the third probe by the Ethics Commissioner, there wasn't a lot of coverage in the French media, but on August 15th,
Partner faced civil fraud allegation. Donc, Monsieur Stephen Anderson.
so Stephen Anderson, the 50% partner in Global Health Imports, or GHI, was sued in civil court. August 21st, Global News.
Officiel awarded federal contract in potential conflict of interest. La compagnie aurait
So the company allegedly got contracts and in so doing violated the ethics legislation. On September 11th, Global News.
won by Mr. Stephen Anderson, the former minister associate, went undisclosed for months. Mais des choses à cacher.
There was something to hide. Why was it not disclosed that there was a contract? And that's what Global News said on September 11th. September 20th.
He spoke to business partner in 2022 as MPs tried to find the other Randy. Ah, vous vous souvenez au début?
Remember, initially he wasn't there. And so, Mr. Speaker, that was September 20th of this year. And remember that June 4th, the minister appeared before the Ethics Committee, and my colleague for Leeds, Grenville, Rideau Lakes asked a question. He's the shadow cabinet minister for ethics. He said, there's a fraud here. There's another Randy involved in a company. What is that other Randy's family what's their last name? What's Randy's surname? That was at the very beginning, back in June. And the minister answered, I don't know that person's name. As I said in my opening statement, I played no role in the operations of GHI. I do not know the individual in question. That person is not me. Mr. Speaker, on September 20th, in the National Post, the Minister of Official Languages admitted that
To find the other Randy. Contradiction.
So it's a contradiction or a lie. The man's an imposter. He's a fraud. In October, the National Post.
Soon be found incompetent in other Randy saga. C'est pourquoi on est ici.
That's why we're here today. On November 9th, the National Post.
Firm alleged it was defrauded by Liberal cabinet minister partner. November 12th, 12 November.
November 12th.
Le ministre des Langues officielles inquiry in wake of a new Randy text. Il y a eu encore d'autres
The
révélations.
Randy
there
text
were
scandal.
Even more revelations made public. On November 13th, the Minister of Official Languages
Should investigate claims of fraud against his former business partner. Quand il y a fraude, il y a fraude.
Where there's fraud, there's fraud. And when you're a cabinet minister, you should be in favor of justice, in favor of getting to the bottom of things. If the minister claims, as he has since the outset, that he had nothing to do with this whole matter, he should be able to open his books and let the police investigate. Investigate the dealings of his former business partner. When you open a can of worms, well, the worms get out and they crawl all over the place. They don't stay in one place. And that's why the Minister of Official Languages is afraid to ask the police to investigate. his former business partner. But that's not all, Mr. Speaker. On November 13th, in the National Post,
It's just shocking. Liberal cabinet minister shifting Indigenous identity scorn.
what? Initially, it was some other Randy. And then it wasn't some other Randy, it was he himself. And now we learn that that company allegedly, fraudulently claimed that one of the stakeholders was, one of the owners was Indigenous, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and he himself admitted that he was a member of the Liberal Party's Indigenous caucus. So he allegedly used Indigenous identity to steal money from actual Indigenous people. And why? Once again, because, as I said before, he wanted to keep both hands in the candy jar and line his own pockets. That's unacceptable. Carrying on, Mr. Speaker, November 15th, the story broke in the National Post.
He was Indigenous. He's not. C'est pas nous qui le disions maintenant.
This isn't us saying it. It's the media. Then, on November 15th, we saw in the National Post,
Et unequivocally, le ministre des Langues officielles said
the Minister of Official Languages,
about his tie to Indigenous ancestry.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Speaker, this is full of information. I have so much information to share with Canadians about all the wrongdoings of the Minister for Official Languages. But, Mr. Speaker, I just don't understand. What I don't understand...
Order. I know there's another conversation going on. I'm hearing it quite readily as I try to listen to the honourable member for...
Alrighty, if you're joining me right now, thank you very much for being here. We are currently watching the House of Commons proceedings. Make sure you hit that like button, hit that sub button if you are new. Let's get right back into it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I was saying...
Member for Windsor West.
I apologize. That was myself. I was just talking with some colleagues here, reminding that it was Stephen Harper and certain cabinet members
I'll take the apology. I'll take the apology for what it's worth. I'll take the apology for what it was worth.
Ooh, some drama.
Member for Mégantic-Lérard.
A little bit of beef.
Mr. Speaker, once again, it is very obvious that each time we go after the Liberal Party, an NDP member stands to distract the House, to defend the Liberal Party. That happens every time. Either way, we have reached this point today. Our public finances are in a mess. So many Canadians are in line at food banks. Crime keeps rising. Canadians have to live in tents because they can't find housing. All of this, Mr. Speaker, is because the NDP supported and continues to support this bad Liberal government which is tolerating an imposter within its own cabinet, an imposter who admitted to being an imposter, but doesn't have the courage to resign. This minister does not respect ministerial responsibility or accountability enough to resign. But why is the Prime Minister hanging on to this minister? That's the real questions Canadians should be asking. But there's more. There's more. There's another imposter in the Minister for Official Languages' CV. He claimed in his CV, and even campaigned on this, he campaigned as being a successful entrepreneur. Well, of course, he may have been successful given the relationships he has within the government. The Minister for Official Languages claimed to have worked as a journalist. It's true, he really did. I couldn't make this up. This isn't a joke. Le Devoir newspaper looked into this claim. They looked into it around June 27th. The Minister for Official Languages claimed on his CV that he was a journalist, but Global News confirmed that he was leading a business which sold millions of dollars of PPE during the pandemic. Well, according to the digital archive that Le Devoir consulted, the minister campaigned in 2019 and 2021 as a former journalist and investigator for Radio-Canada. Well, the Order of Journalists of Quebec found that claim to be rather shady because, get ready for this, the Minister for Official Languages never wrote or published an article in the two newspapers he claims to have written for. The representative of Radio-Canada, a Radio-Canada spokesperson, told Le Devoir that he had never signed an article in either of those newspapers. And as for the Journal des Affaires, the second newspaper, Marine Thomas, representative of the paper, said, "I was unaware that he had ever worked for us. She is the editor-in-chief. She is the one who approves all opinion pieces." But the minister had written some editorial or opinion pieces from 2005 to 2007.
Okay, well, that's awkward. There's been a lot of issues today with the CPAC stream. I don't know what's going on today, guys. It's like every other 20, 30 minutes it's going out, it's shutting down. My apologies. I went to go get some water.
Actually following the debate, in which I suspect all of us want to ultimately get to that vote and see that happen. But the question I have for the member is, because the Conservative Party is so hung up on this whole character assassination, and they've been doing this since 2010, I'm wondering if maybe we should universally apply that, and let's start talking about the leader of the Conservative Party and the numerous scandals that he himself has directly been involved in, Mr. Speaker. I think
it's like the third time the CPAC feed has shut off. It just keeps buffering and having issues. They're having a lot of problems today over in Ottawa.
Is out there that is real, and that is that you have the only leader of the House of Commons that refuses to get the security clearance on foreign international interference is in fact the leader of the Conservative Party. I'm wondering if the member would not agree that the leader of the Conservative Party really needs to reflect on his motivation for not getting it. I believe it's because there's something in his personal background that he does not want to share to Canadians. Would he not agree that the leader of the Conservative Party should come clean and tell us what about his personal background is preventing him from getting the security clearance?
Yes, the problems did start 9 years ago. That is true. But typically the CPAC stream runs with no issues at all. It's just been stuttering and buffering. It's gone down numerous times already. Thank you everybody for joining. If you are still here, I apologize for that.
Here to discuss a question of privilege about Stephen Anderson, but then he did not go on to ask a question about Stephen Anderson. Come on, Mr. Speaker. He should take this more seriously. This question of privilege is incredibly serious. We're debating it here today because Stephen Anderson refused to give the House of Commons the documents which would surely prove the Minister for Official Languages' involvement with the company while he was minister. Those documents would confirm that there was communication between the minister and his business partner, even though he should not have been doing so under the Conflict of Interest Act. The Liberals will do everything they can to distract us.
What's up, Shipton? How's it going?
Talking about the real facts, and that's not surprising from the member for Winnipeg North, the Honourable Member for Rivière-des-Mille. Thank you, and happy Monday, Mr. Speaker. Did the member for Mégantic-L'Érable think for just a second that maybe Randy had multiple personalities? Right. More seriously, there was a question of privilege. The first one, we debated it for a month. We're starting a second question of privilege today. Here's my question for my Conservative colleague. When will he be ready to get back to work, parliamentary work, and to do so seriously? The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. What a shame. Shameful, Mr. Speaker. It's shameful that the Bloc Québécois supported this government on $500 billion of inflationary spending.
I remember when the Bloc a few weeks ago said that they were going to call a non-confidence vote in Trudeau, and we're still waiting. God, the Bloc are a bunch of liars. A bunch of really bad liars, too.
An imposter minister for accountability is not our parliamentary duty. Well, there you have it, Mr. Speaker. The Bloc Québécois doesn't understand what it's doing here in Ottawa. All opposition parties must seek accountability from the Liberal government rather than just support them vote after vote after vote.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since we're talking about some of the past practices that are taking place, this member knows that his former Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, talked about Atlantic Canada and Quebec being part of a cultural defeatism. Is that still the current position of the Conservative Party, a cultural defeatism for Atlantic Canada and for Quebec?
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Once again, Mr. Speaker, the NDP has a special opportunity to walk the talk. They made a big show of ripping up the collaboration agreement with the Liberal Party at the end of August. They said on that occasion that the Liberals weren't working for them anymore, that the Liberals were not bringing the country in the right direction. Yet, every time they have an opportunity to defend this bad Liberal government, they do so. They try to distract us, change the subject, talk about something else, all in an effort to avoid being accountable and being responsible in voting with Canadians and with the majority of opposition MPs to bring down this government so that we can finally trigger an election, so that we can finally put an end to all the harm caused by this Liberal government. They are, of course, voting with the Liberal government. I don't think anyone should be taking lessons from the NDP. We're in this situation today in Canada in the House because they supported the Liberals 1,000 times over. Questions and comments?
Sherwood Park versus Saskatchewan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my colleague for an excellent speech. We're in the House today discussing the fraudulent, dishonest behavior of the Liberal employment minister pretending to be Indigenous, his company claiming to be Indigenous owned in order to try to get contracts that had been set aside for Indigenous entrepreneurs. And there's a context to this. The AFN has testified before the Government Operations Committee that actually a majority of those companies that are benefiting from these Indigenous procurement set-asides are shell companies. There's rampant abuse in this program. Elite, well-connected insiders trying to take advantage of this program. People that are not Indigenous themselves trying to take advantage of a program that is supposed to be about creating economic development for Indigenous peoples. Our Conservative Party is committed to real solutions that will advance economic development for Indigenous Canadians, whereas the Liberals, it is clear now, have been using this program to try to advantage not only their friends, but themselves.
Why aren't we focused on improving economic development in the entire country as a whole for everybody?
Employment's company says about how this government likes to talk on the one hand about reconciliation, but it's clear now that they're just using that as an excuse to try to enrich their friends and themselves.
Whoa!
The honourable member for Mégantic-L'Érable.
Some big words there.
Mr. Speaker, I could not agree more with my colleague. For the Liberals, everything is opportunistic. They're trying to take advantage of the system as much as possible. What I have here, Mr. Speaker, is an article from the National Post. For years, the Liberals said that this Member of Parliament was Indigenous. He is not. I cannot show you the article, Mr. Speaker, but it's clear that the Liberal Party has described its Indigenous Liberal caucus. Their list of that caucus was published on November 14th, 2024. And who do we see in the photos of the members? Oh, well, it might be the other Randy, but I don't think it is, because in fact, it is a
the Randy
photo
situation comes back. I wonder what happened to the SDTC. Are they going to talk about that at all? Or did that just disappear as well? The over-month debate over the SDTC.
His spot in any cabinet, in any position. It's time that the Prime Minister fire him. The Honourable Member for Waterloo. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member for Winnipeg North said he is in agreement with this question of privilege, as am I. We do need to understand what has transpired. We do need to hear from Mr. Anderson. If all members support that, then we can make that happen. Here's my question for the member across the way. Is there a member or a party which is not in agreement with having him appear before the House? I agree with the member for Winnipeg North. We agree. The Liberals agree. I believe that the Conservatives are in favor of this. The Bloc and the NDP have expressed their support. So can the member name another member or another party which is not in agreement? Because if we all agree, then we can find a solution together. Then we can obtain the information that this House, and I believe all members, want. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I thank my colleague for her question. There is one solution, Mr. Speaker. It's simple, it's readily available to us, and then we could conclude this matter and move on very, very quickly. And what is that solution? I am fairly sure you already know it, Mr. Speaker. The solution is for the Minister for Official Languages to resign because he is no longer worthy of his position. So that's the solution. Or, Mr. Speaker, if he doesn't wish to resign, if he's not dignified enough to do so, then the Prime Minister should fire him. Thank you. Resuming debate. The Honourable Member for New Westminster Burnaby.
Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to rise on this issue, the sub-amendment, of course, that we're not supporting. I'll come back to that in a moment, and the motion that we are supporting when it comes to this issue of the question of privilege. And I'd like to say, Mr. Speaker, unlike the Conservatives who are acting incredibly childishly and disingenuously in the House of Commons, we actually believe in transparency and getting to the bottom of things. And that's why we have raised broad concerns about both of the questions of privilege, the STTC, that my colleague from Windsor West has raised repeatedly, and now this issue of calling before the bar Mr. Anderson. that the member from Hamilton Centre has also raised in committee and raised in the House of Commons. We've raised concerns because we want Canadians to get to the bottom of this Liberal scandal. And I will submit as well, Mr. Speaker, as you well know, that when it came to the SNC-Lavalin scandal, it was the NDP MPs that played the pivotal role in actually getting to the bottom, getting answers for Canadians. When it came to We Charity, it was the member from Timmins James Bay and myself that got to the bottom of that issue as well. And when it comes to the STDC, and coming now to the questions swirling around GHI, these are issues that the NDP believes Canadians have the right to transparency on. And that is absolutely a fundamental principle in this democracy, Mr. Speaker. It was abused horribly during the Harper regime. Conservative corruption, conservative scandals, the cover-ups were unbelievable. I'll come back to that in just a moment, Mr. Speaker. Every single Conservative MP should hang their head in shame when they speak to issues of transparency and accountability, when we had the worst government in Canadian history, without a doubt, over a number of years with a majority government shutting down every single parliamentary inquiry, shutting down every single attempt at transparency. We didn't have people called to the bar during the Harper regime, Mr. Speaker, because Conservatives refused it, shut it down, refused any information going to Canadians. So for Conservative MPs to stand up and postulate and do the play acting that they do so well when they had the worst, most corrupt regime that engaged in the broadest cover-ups in Canadian history and have never apologized for it. They've never come forward and said, we're sorry. They obviously haven't learned the lessons. In fact, we know the 4 slogans that the Conservatives are saying that they'd love to bring forward in the next election. And it's bring back, Mr. Speaker. It's bring back Conservative cover-ups. It's bring back Conservative cuts, as we saw during the Conservative regime. Bring back Conservative corporate tax havens and bring back Conservative corruption. The reality is Canadians deserve better. They deserve better than the Liberal scandals that we're seeing now, and they deserve better than the unbelievably horrible years of the Harper regime and the cover-ups and scandals and misspending.
Oh my God, this guy is just repeating himself over and over again. What have the NDP done for Canadians? What has Jagmeet Singh done for Canadians? Oh, dental care. You want to talk about dental care? Well over 2 million people are lined up at food banks. Kind of a non-issue there with dental care when you're literally starving.
Either. That's why the NDP has stood up and said repeatedly, we need transparency regardless what the source of the scandal is. It's important to get to the bottom of things. And Mr. Speaker, the National Post article is profoundly disturbing today. When I'll read just an excerpt into the record, Mr. Speaker. This is something that is profoundly concerning, published just a few minutes ago, that the medical supply company, co-owned by the by the employment minister, shared a post office box with a woman named in arrests in 2 major drug busts, according to corporate filings. The mailbox, rented at an Edmonton UPS store, appears on the April 2020 license for the Edmonton MP's former enterprise, Global Health Imports Corporation, or GHI, which I mentioned, which National Post obtained from Health Canada through access to information legislation. UPS store spokesman Steve Mormon said that someone named Francesca LeBlanc had rented the mailbox since 2013. GHI's name is not on the rental agreement, he said, although GHI's mail sometimes arrived at the mailbox. He said people occasionally turned up at the store in the Edmonton Strip Mall looking for GHI. The member from Edmonton Centre owned half of GHI at the time the mailbox was shared with her, and the Liberal cabinet minister recently said he gave up his shares this year following public scrutiny of the business's dealings. This summer, Global News revealed a link between the member from Edmonton Centre's former business partner, Stephen Anderson, who is the object of the motion that is before us today that we support, to call him before the bar, and Francesca LeBlanc. It reported that after the member from Edmonton Centre won the September 2021 election, was appointed to cabinet, LeBlond and Anderson registered a business together called 13560-449 Canada Limited. Now, Mr. Speaker, these are serious concerns, serious allegations. That's why we support the motion bringing Mr. Anderson before the bar to answer these important questions. I know that the member from Hamilton Centre, who is our ethics critic, was forthright in pushing for answers that Canadians deserve to get, to ensure that Canadians would actually understand what transpired. And because Mr. Anderson was not forthcoming repeatedly at committee hearings when...
Man, you know Trudeau is a terrible leader when his own party has people leaving, retiring, signing petitions to get him removed. You know it's bad.
I have 2 points to make, Mr. Speaker, before I come back to the issues of how...
Liberal MPs have been jumping ship for the past few months now. A lot of them forced to stay quiet because I would like to believe that a few of them are probably terrified of Trudeau. And he's most likely muzzled a very good portion of them as well from speaking out.
My first point is this. These are serious allegations of connections, as Conservatives have pointed out in their statements as well, concerning the issue of illegal activity linked potentially to the post office box that was registered in the name of a company that belonged at least 50% ownership to a member of...
It is a sort of cult. It's very strange. But yeah, it kind of is.
And I recall, Mr. Speaker, and I wanted to remind the Canadian public of how bad things were under the Harper regime. We don't want a repetition of that. But I'll read into the record an article dated May 8th, 2008 from the Toronto Star, which talks about concerns about a top cabinet minister in the Conservative government and a former girlfriend with past ties to the Hells Angels. Yep. Now, Prime Minister Stephen Harper, this is a quote from the article, dismissed security concerns over the relationship between a top cabinet minister and a former girlfriend with past ties to the Hells Angels. Yep. Stephen Harper brushed off the matter and instead accused the opposition of being, and I quote this, gossipy old busybodies. Now, Mr. Speaker, this was the reaction of Stephen Harper to a similar situation. And this is why I say that New Democrats, as the adults in the House, are not going to take...
Yeah, this is just pathetic. Like, Harper he's been long gone, and this is just another move from the NDP doing absolutely nothing to focus on issues that are happening right now. It's Harper this, Harper that. And would you look at it? The CPAC stream has gone down again. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 5th time today the CPAC stream has died. Your taxpayer dollars are going to something quite fantastic here on the CPAC stream. What is happening? What is going on today, man? They can't even get their stream right. What makes you think that the government is going to do anything right? What's up, Daniel Price? What's up, Lisa Hudson? How's it going? As we all know, all this is fraud, and they want to cover it up. Yes, it's a cult. Always blaming Harper. Yeah, it's weird. It's really weird blaming Harper again. He's been out of power for a very long time now. And I guess, yeah, you could sit here and say, well, he did this and that, and so happened to do this, which caused all of this to happen in snowball effect or whatever. But no, you really can't sit here and blame that, especially because Trudeau has fundamentally annihilated the country. We are just not living in the same country that we were 10 years ago. 10 years ago. Losing my voice. Just like the CPAC stream is losing its feed. Losing my voice. Here we go.
To be homeless. Unbelievably. And yet, no Conservative MP has ever stood up and apologized for the years of corruption and cuts and all the hurt that they caused to so many Canadians. Not a single Conservative has ever done that. I think Canadians would be forgiving if one Conservative was willing to stand up and say, we're sorry for all the damage we did to this country. We're sorry for the $300 billion that we gave to the rich and the well-connected and to Conservative insiders. We apologize for that. We're sorry for slashing our healthcare system, for the implications that we're still seeing today. We're sorry for throwing veterans out on the streets. We're sorry for cutting CBSA and RCMP officers and cutting the crime prevention centers and seeing crime go up. Crime is always higher when under the Conservatives, Mr. Speaker. We've seen this time and time again. In the United States, it's Republican states that have the highest crime rates. In Canada, it's Conservative provinces.
It's actually not Republican states that have the highest crime rates. It's actually Democrat states and Democratic cities. Wow, what a lie. This guy is just spewing garbage.
Of crime prevention centers. When we know that $1 invested in crime prevention saves...
It's almost like the cities where you defund the police the most are going to have the highest crime rates. Places like, I don't know, Atlanta or Detroit, for example, or all of California. I know that's not a city, but it's pretty bad.
On public safety, they certainly do not. They were terrible. Now, you can criticize, Mr. Speaker, as we do in the NDP corner of this House, and criticize the Liberals for not fixing what the Conservatives broke. They haven't reestablished the crime prevention centers. They haven't sourced up CBSA and the RCMP to the extent that's needed. They haven't corrected all of the Conservatives' gaffes and irresponsible actions, and that's on them, Mr. Speaker. And I can tell you, if the NDP wins in the next election, we're going to be making sure that those investments take place, Mr. Speaker. And we have the Conservatives.
Order. I'm having a hard time. I'm having a hard time hearing the member speaking. The honourable member for New Westminster Burnaby.
And so, Mr. Speaker, I mean, they laugh, the Conservatives laugh at their health care cuts that caused so many problems. They laugh at cutting all the public safety infrastructure. They laugh at the $30 billion, according to the PBO, that they gave Mr. Harper and the entire Harper regime. And every single Conservative MP voted for it. The $30 billion that go to offshore tax havens, they laugh at this. Canadians aren't laughing, Mr. Speaker. We saw under the Conservative government a doubling of food bank lineups, a doubling of housing costs, and Conservatives will say...
And you are to blame because you sat there under Trudeau's wing and helped him every step of the way.
And capable of governing the way Conservatives deserve, Canadians deserve to see. They want to see a government that does things like put in place dental care and pharmacare. This is the result of the NDP, anti-scab legislation, affordable housing. Finally, after decades of having affordable housing simply ignored under the Conservatives and the Liberals, the NDP forced investments in affordable housing. Finally, these are all things that the NDP did with 25 members, and you can imagine, Mr. Speaker, what we'd be able to do with 225 members.
Yeah, absolute annihilation of our country. That's what the NDP would do.
Make sure that seniors actually receive the supports that they need. We wouldn't be throwing veterans out on the streets. Yep. And this is, Conservatives laugh at this. You say, you threw veterans out in the streets, and Conservatives laugh. Yep. They laugh at veterans with disabilities being thrown out in the street, and they laugh at that. They find that funny. They find it very, very funny, right? And yet they go to Remembrance Day ceremonies and they pretend, they put their hand over their heart and they say, we stand for veterans. No, they don't, Mr. Speaker. We saw what they do to veterans, and we're not going to let them do it to veterans ever again. What they did was reprehensible. Every single Conservative MP should hang their head in shame. Hang their head in shame for what they did to veterans, for what they did to seniors, forcing them to work longer, cutting their pensions, Mr. Speaker, all with the goal. The Harper regime's primary goal was to make sure that the billionaires and the big banks and the wealthy CEOs had massive amounts of money. $30 billion a year they gave away to overseas tax havens for the rich and the privileged. They gave $118 billion to banks, taking that money from CMHC, housing, which should have been a priority under the Harper regime. It was already in crisis, and yet Conservatives took that money from CMHC and gave it to the banks so that they could get executive bonuses and dividends paid out. Like, unbelievable track record. The worst government in Canadian history. Now, Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives have offered up an amendment to their own motion. Now, we're supporting the motion. We want to call Mr. Anderson before the bar. And we want to do that because we weren't able to do it during the Harper years. Conservatives refused any sort of transparency. This is the second time that we'll be able to call a member before the bar.
So yeah, there you have it.
For Mr. Firth. This is important, transparency. It is tools that members of Parliament can use, that parliamentarians can use to ensure that we get to the bottom of issues. And when we have uncooperative witnesses, that we can actually get the answers that Canadians are asking for. For Christian Firth, we supported that call to the bar. And because it is a parliamentary demand, it is done. The practice is, Mr. Speaker, as you're well aware, to ensure that every recognized party, and in this case as well, there was an allocation given to the Green Party, which is not a recognized party, to ensure that all members of Parliament had an equitable distribution of the questions. So you would think Conservatives, if they were mature, they weren't children, they would approach...
You're all children.
...in the same...
The honourable member for Prince George.
He just gets cut off.
Certainly parliamentary language is something that the NDP pretends to care about, and the member's sort of gone on a bit of a tirade with anti-parliamentary language. I wish he would get back to the subject at hand, and please proceed with parliamentary language as you should.
I thank the honourable member for the reminder.
Oh, the political theatrics are getting strong right now. Thank you all for joining. Let's get back into it.
Waterloo, same point of order.
Yes, just on that same point of order, we've heard many speeches today from Conservatives as well. One of the Conservative members actually was referring to a cabinet minister in a very derogatory manner. So I would suggest that member talk to his own.
Yeah, no, I would remind honourable members to try to stick to as parliamentary as we possibly can, even though maybe sometimes the debate that we're having is difficult. Same point of order or different point of order? The honourable member for Brantford-Brant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For a moment there, actually for the last 8 or 9 minutes, I thought I was transported back to 2011.
That's right. We're following the debate. We're following.
I'm calling for relevance.
Oh,
I appreciate.
The tensions are running high right now, ladies and gentlemen.
I appreciate the relevance. The honourable member New Westminster Burnaby. And
thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, the truth hurts for Conservatives, and they can't ignore their record. They can't hide from their record, and they can't cover up their record like they did the myriad scandals that took place during the Conservative reign. Now, I'll just mention just for a moment, Mr. Speaker, because we've talked about the Liberal scandals. The Conservative corruption needs to be read into the record to be believed. The ETS scandal was $400 million stolen from seniors, stolen from veterans.
Harper lives rent-free in this guy's head.
Make ends meet. The G8 scandal was $1 billion.
This guy dreams about Harper at night.
Harper regime shut down any inquiry into that. They didn't care about taxpayers' money then. Phoenix pay scandal, $2.2 billion. The Liberals, ill-judged, continued on with the Phoenix pay scandal, and we see the results even today, Mr. Speaker. But that's $2.2 billion, and Conservatives wear that. The anti-terrorism funding. You remember that paper trail that just disappeared, $3.1 billion. Now, you put all those numbers together, that's $7 billion, Mr. Speaker, misspent. No Conservative has ever apologized for it. No Conservative has ever said, we were wrong to misspend billions and billions of dollars. We were wrong to shut down Parliament so that we couldn't get to the bottom of it. This is something that we apologize for. I just want to hear one Conservative MP stand up and apologize.
This guy just really wants an apology, and he is like on his knees begging for it right now.
Healthcare, slashing public safety funding so that, of course, criminals could prosper because there were no more crime prevention centers. The RCMP was cut back. CBSA was cut back. And Conservatives have never apologized for that. Their record is absolutely deplorable. And yet, no Conservative MP is willing to stand up and say, we were wrong to do all that. So, of course, how can we trust them today? Now, the sub-amendment, Mr. Speaker, very clearly, where they...
Yeah, like he's literally begging. He's literally asking over and over again. He's like, I just want one Conservative MP to stand up and apologize. It's like, man, move on. Move on.
Conservative corruption and Conservative corporate tax cuts.
Come on.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Waterloo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I really, I almost feel like seeking unanimous consent to give the member more time to speak because I think there's a lot more Conservative scandals that we need to hear about.
Ah, yes. Divert away from your own scandals.
Sorry, I got distracted. Obviously, Mr. Speaker, there's a lot of back and forth chatter in the chamber. The question...
Oh, today is going to be rowdy as hell in question period. I've got a strong feeling it is going to be a very interesting day. They had a week off, so it's gonna... If Commons proceedings are like this, I can only imagine question period is going to be even worse. Greg is not going to be a happy soul today.
Just appreciation for reminding Canadians as to what took place under 10 years of Prime Minister Stephen Harper. The question is that he referred to a precedent that was set not too long ago where parliamentarians were able to ask Mr. Firth to come to the bar and the way that breakdown of questions happened. I recognize in this chamber it is parties that are recognized because they have 12 seats or more. The Green Party was given an opportunity to ask Mr. Firth questions. I would like to hear the members' comments on whether, having been duly elected, Green Party members should also have the opportunity to ask questions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for New Westminster, Burnaby.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I mean, this is a Liberal scandal. We have to get to the bottom of it. Parliament is making the decision to call Mr. Anderson before the bar. But this wacky Conservative amendment, which basically says, hey, the Conservatives will take 2/3 of all the questions, when we know that their track record is absolutely dismal, that they, under their years in government, were the most corrupt and most dishonest government in Canadian history. And now they're saying, well, we want to have 2/3 of the questions. We don't want the questions to go to the opposition parties like the Bloc or the NDP or the Green Party. We don't want the government to have questions. We want to take 2/3 of all the questions. Yeah. It's a bit rich, Mr. Speaker, and it just shows how immature they are and how they can never form government because God help us if they do.
Questions and comments? Question, commentaire? L'honorable député de...
The honourable member for Saint... What is it? Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a bit of a nightmare. It's like a nightmare. We've been here for a month. We haven't been able to deal with anything real, with the housing crisis, the climate crisis, the language crisis. We could have been talking about that for a month, but instead, we haven't been able to. So this morning I thought maybe finally we'll be able to get down to work and get to the bottom of things today. But no, what a disappointment. One question of privilege ended, and yet it's just being followed by another one. It's important, I agree, but still, we're going to spend more weeks just talking about that and nothing else. What about homelessness and the encampments for people? And it's important to deal with this issue, and the government of Quebec has a plan already to deal with the unhoused, but the money needs to flow to Quebec City so that can be dealt with. But no, the federal government wants accountability. They want to attach strings, and so the money still isn't flowing, and we're on the verge of winter. And if we want to put pressure on the Liberals so that the money flows, so that the money can be invested in Quebec to put an end to the encampments before winter, why can't we do that? The honourable member for New Westminster, Burnaby. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I have a lot of respect for my colleague. The fact is, as he knows, that all that funding to deal with homelessness and all the funding for affordable housing, it all comes from the NDP. We pushed for that for years, and tens of millions of dollars were finally earmarked for that. That's something the NDP's been pushing for years. It's going to make a huge difference. We fought, the member for Burnaby South also fought for that funding to go to Quebec as well as all across Canada in order to provide affordable housing, to make sure, to get assurances that affordable housing would be built. After years of conservative inaction, no investment, and so on. So finally, the NDP managed to force the government to invest in housing. And I'd like to say one other thing. My colleague raised some significant issues in Quebec. There are 600,000 Quebecers who are already part of the NDP's plan for the dental care, and obviously dentists in Quebec and denturists and hygienists, dental hygienists are a part of the NDP's dental care plan, and the coverage is almost 100%. So I hope my colleague from the bloc will stop opposing the NDP's dental care plan, because it's something that's truly improving the lives, the daily lives of Quebecers. Questions and comments?
Member for Courtney Alberni.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm really grateful to my colleague for his speech, but also talking about the importance of supporting veterans. Here we are, all of us MPs coming back from our ridings where we went and paid respect to those that served in the military and RCMP, put their lives on the line to protect us, Mr. Speaker, and serve our country. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm glad he talked about the amnesia down the bench here on the Conservative side, where the leader of the official opposition, who was in cabinet, Mr. Speaker, cut a third of the employees at Veterans Affairs, led to a backlog of tens of thousands of veterans with disability seeking disability benefits, Mr. Speaker, that are waiting for their support that they need. They closed 9 veterans offices. Mr. Speaker, they fought veterans in court. The Phoenix pay system, I will correct my colleague, because it wasn't $2.2 billion. It's now over $3 billion that it's cost Canadian taxpayers. It was supposed to save, the Conservatives promised, it was going to save us $78 million a year, Mr. Speaker. That's how the privatization scheme went for the Conservatives and how it's impacted Canadians. So through you, Mr. Speaker, does my colleague agree that the leader of the official opposition who was in cabinet, in the Stephen Harper cabinet, that caused so much harm?
Still talking about Stephen Harper, while the Justin Trudeau government has put us in this position, our country is in the deepest amount of debt it has ever been in. We are so far in debt that that whole the balance will budget itself thing that Trudeau said is not even an option, and realistically never was. The fact that he ran on that catchphrase was very, very interesting. And the fact that anybody believed that is also quite interesting. And the CPAC stream has gone down for a 6th time. This is actually brutal. I don't know what's going on there today. It keeps going down on repeat.
I've been in his riding right across.
What is going on?
The
What is happening? What a joke. What an absolute joke. They can't even keep the stream running.
And if they have a disability, they seek to get the supports from Veterans Affairs that they deserve, that they from a grateful country. There's no Canadian.
Oh my God, it's completely out of sync. It's probably going to go down again.
And supports, but yet the member from Carleton and all the Conservatives that were present in that despicable Harper regime slash those services, force that person with a disability to travel sometimes hundreds of kilometers to try to get the basic services that they deserved. They put their lives on the line for the country, and Conservatives gave them the back of the hand, and every single Conservative MP should hang their head in shame.
Absolutely.
All right, it's completely out of whack, completely out of sync.
Because I listened to
at least we could still
the member's speech, and he was
listen.
quick to throw darts at the Liberal Party, who were the government of the day, He was quick to throw darts at the government, former Conservative government, but he didn't throw any darts back at the NDP. And you wouldn't know, but they were squeaky clean. They had the scandal of office rentals that went to court, and they all were ordered to pay back the money. So I wonder if he and all the NDP were ordered to pay back the money. So I wonder if he and all the NDP members paid back the funds from the scandal that they had?
The honourable member for New Westminster Burnaby.
Yeah, this is brutal. I don't know what's going on today. I can only imagine it's going to keep going down, though.
The Liberals, unfortunately, are going to find themselves in another part of this House after the next election because they refuse to stand up. And it'll be an NDP government fixing things. And one of the things that we will never do, Mr. Speaker, I commit to that, we will never use or misuse the Board of Internal Economy for partisan purposes. And the member knows fully well what was involved in that scandalous time under the Harper government, where we saw basic parliamentary institutions, the Auditor General's Department slashed, the PBO slashed. The Board of Internal Economy turned into partisan, for partisan purposes. It simply was a low time in our democracy. And fortunately, an NDP government will enhance our institutions, not diminish them.
Reprise du débat, continuing debate, and for a whole 12 minutes, the honourable member for Bradford-Brant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is always a pleasure to rise on behalf of the good people of Brantford-Brant. But here we are, another day, yet another Liberal scandal. This time, a member for Edmonton Centre, a cabinet minister, who finds himself embroiled in yet another scandal that seems to be growing legs, Mr. Speaker. And what a legacy for this Prime Minister and members of his government to take with them when they are defeated in the next general election. A legacy of being the most corrupt, the most unethical government Canada has ever seen. But you know, this is not what the Prime Minister promised Canadians. In 2015, he talked about sunny ways, talked quite a bit about sunny ways, and in fact followed that up with an open letter to Canadians dated November the 4th, 2015, and I want to highlight certain passages. Canadians need to have faith in their government's honesty and willingness to listen. That is why we committed to set a higher bar for openness and transparency in Ottawa. But in order for you to trust your government, you need a government that will trust you. When we make a mistake, as all governments do, it is important that we acknowledge that mistake and we learn from it. We know that you do not expect us to be perfect, but you expect us to work tirelessly and to be honest, open, and sincere in our efforts to serve the public interest. He finalized the letter by saying this, Mr. Speaker: I am committed to leading an open, honest government that is accountable to Canadians, lives up to the highest ethical standards, brings our country together, and applies the utmost care and prudence in the handling of public funds. What an absolute joke, let alone disgrace to the Canadians who voted him into power into 2015. Because we've seen nothing but an open, honest, ethical government. And just to name a few of the scandals that we have discussed over the last 9 years, we all remember Gropegate. We remember Elbowgate. We remember blackface, with the Prime Minister not even remember how many times he wore blackface. We all remember the disgraceful comment to an Indigenous proud woman at a fundraiser, "Thank you for your donation." We remember the experience it differently.
Point of order to the honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
Yeah, I think he just misrepresented. The disgraceful comment was the leader of the Conservatives who said Indigenous people needed to get hard, learn how to work hard.
That's we're following the debate again. So yeah, I appreciate the help, but let's stick to the points of order for this House. The honourable member for Brantford-Brant.
Point of order instead of disrupting all the time.
So where I was interrupted with not a point of order, but debate, was I was talking about experiencing it differently by our Prime Minister. We, of course, know the SNC scandal. We know the WE scandal, the ArriveCan scandal, which continues to be debated in committee and in this House, the Green Slush Fund scandal that is approaching $1 billion of wasteful taxpayer dollars.
Shame.
We remember foreign interference, that is still a problem with our democracy. We remember Billionaires Row condo scandal, and now, Mr. Speaker, we have the other Randy scandal. For the past 9 years, this Prime Minister
scandal
has led the most ethically compromised government in Canadian history. It took him more than a year of foot-dragging to appoint an ethics commissioner, probably because without one, he and his government and his backbench wouldn't be investigated for bad, unethical behavior. From his frequent taxpayer-funded vacations, his protection of SNC Lavalin, granting a government contract to a company that gave money to his family members, handing out billions of dollars to well-connected Liberal insiders and consultants, the Prime Minister has a long track record of using government to benefit himself and his friends, and Liberal MPs are learning from the best. The Trudeau government has been slapped with 5 ethical violations.
The Honourable, you can't use the name Trudeau.
Yes, thank you for that.
The Prime Minister.
Prime Minister's government, thank you, Mr. Speaker, has been slapped with 5 ethical violations, the most in Canadian history. Time after time, this Prime Minister has shown total contempt for our ethics laws. He himself has been the subject of 3 ethics investigations and was found guilty of breaking those laws twice. This Liberal government allows the culture of law-breaking to persist, as 6 Liberals have been found guilty of breaking ethics laws. Several ministers in the Prime Minister's government, as well as the Prime Minister himself, found guilty in violation of numerous laws. In fact, the Prime Minister, as I indicated, has been found guilty on 2 occasions. The first was for accepting a 2016 vacation on the Aga Khan's private island while the Aga Khan was lobbying the government. The second was for improperly pressuring the Attorney General during the SNC Lavalin scandal to interfere in a prosecution. Similarly, the former finance minister breached ethics laws by failing to disclose ownership of a French villa held in a corporation and for overseeing federal dealings with We Charity, despite his family's financial ties to the organization. The former fisheries minister also violated conflict of interest rules by awarding a lucrative Arctic surf clam contract to a company linked to his wife's cousin. And additionally, the Minister of Small Business was found guilty of violating ethics laws for awarding a contract to a firm co-owned by her friend Amanda Alvaro. These cases, Mr. Speaker, underscore persistent issues of ethical lapses.
This is wild. He just listed off an entire laundry list of violations and breaking of laws, and here we still are.
Another ethics scandal. While serving as minister, just by way of background, Mr. Speaker, he co-owned GHI, Global Health Initiative, Imports, a company that secured questionable government contracts. Despite claiming to step away from the business, evidence leads to his continued involvement, ultimately violating ethics rules. His former business partner, Stephen Anderson, is now facing fraud charges, raising further questions about the misuse of taxpayer dollars. This minister has also faced criticism for false claims about his Indigenous heritage, which the government and he had to retract. This, combined with his ties to a lobbyist who secured $110 million in federal contracts and his company's receipt of $8 million in contracts, shows a pattern of misconduct. Canadians, Mr. Speaker, deserve accountability, but this Liberal government continues to protect its own instead of delivering solid, ethical leadership that Canadians expect. Before I get into the crux of the speech, I want to share for those listening that the conflict of interest requires cabinet ministers to divest their controlled interests either by selling them or placing them in a blind trust within 100 days of their appointment. It also forbids them from having any management or control over the trust assets. A minister would then be found breaking the law if he was found to have either managed or controlled the trust assets or the day-to-day business of the company itself. And I'll get into that later on in my speech and how it bodes very poorly for the Minister of Employment. So how does this all start? The mysterious Randy texts are at the heart of the probe in the Employment Minister's shady business dealings. A year after he joined the federal cabinet, revelations came about questioning about his involvement with GHI. When appearing at the Ethics Committee, the minister repeatedly denied that he was the Randy in question and stated that he never had any operational role in the company that he co-founded since his re-election in 2021, even though he still owns half of the shares in a number company that he in fact disclosed to the Commissioner. The first set of text messages obtained by Global News showed that Stephen Anderson, the co-founder of GHI, transferred an urgent message from a certain Randy to a Melvini Goawi, business was found guilty, PPE company in California, to send a wire transfer of $500,000 to secure a large shipment of nitrile gloves. The quote reads, and the text reads, "Additionally, Anderson, it takes 10 seconds to complete a transfer. I am telling you, we are not allocating like this. Please reach out and see what the reason is now. You assured me this morning that this was done first thing and allowed you to hold the stock today. It's midday and nothing is completed," reads the text. The message ends by telling Anderson to be ready in 15 minutes for a partner call. Anderson followed up with Gowie 30 minutes later, telling her that he spoke with Randy and other GHI employees who agreed to wait a little bit longer for the wire transfer. Those exchanges, Mr. Speaker, were dated September 8, 2022, which is almost a year after the minister was first sworn in Cabinet as Associate Minister of Finance. I see I've got 5 seconds left, so I will wrap up right there before I move into a second area. Thank you.
What a speech from the legend himself. That was quite something there, exposing the list of Trudeau's violations and unethical practices.
Intimidate. It infringes on Canadians' rights to privacy and free expression, leaving victims vulnerable to threats, harassment, and harm. Canadians targeted by doxing may face unjust penalties from employers, professional associations, or regulatory bodies based on reputational harm rather than verified misconduct. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees freedom of expression, yet these rights are compromised when individuals face threats from doxing and intimidation. Productive legislation is necessary to penalize doxing perpetrators and deter those abusers, ensuring Canadians' rights and securities in the digital age. I call on Canada to criminalize doxing and prevent individuals from getting penalized solely based on reputational harm caused by doxing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Desnette, Miss Nippy, Churchill River.
Speaker, it is with bittersweet thankfulness that I stand and recognize the life and legacy of Dr. Jake Letkeman. A pillar of our communities, he was once in a lifetime larger-than-life man who knew his faith had called him to live a life in service to others. He did that joyfully and with abundant love. Dr. Jake recognized the health care struggles in Saskatchewan's rural north. He delivered thousands of babies and spent decades traveling to provide ultrasounds and other maternal care to expectant mothers. Holidays for Jake, his wife Myrna, and their family would often find themselves overseas helping in clinics in smaller communities or helping rebuild homes after a hurricane. One of the most lasting legacies Jake left in the community of Meadow Lake was as a founder of the Door of Hope, a food bank and life skills organization that serves the most vulnerable and marginalized people in our community. Speaker, today, I ask all to celebrate with me the life of a man known by some as father, papa, or doctor, but who was known by all as friend, Dr. Jake Letkeman.
The honourable member for Toronto Danforth.
Mr. Speaker, at a time when we talk so much about division, I'm going to share with you a wonderful story of what happens when we bring people together. Last week, we literally moved the mouth of the Don River and reconnected it to Lake Ontario. I got to join with members from the provincial, federal, municipal government, including the Mississaugas accredited as Indigenous partners and hereditary owners of that land, to make a big splash about a big moment in urban renewal. When we look at it, it's one of the largest infrastructure projects in all of North America. It flood protects homes in my community of South Leslieville. It unlocks land for housing. In fact, when the project is done, it will be home to over...
Yeah, this is statements by members. They can just speak about whatever they please for the minute or two they have. We will be getting into question period very shortly, everybody. In a couple minutes, question period will begin. Greg period will start. There's Greg. There he is. Here we go.
On October 24th, the group Lendemain de Veille was crowned Group of the Year at the Country Gala, and that is no small feat. These musicians, who are as talented as they are entertaining, and that's saying something, because they have won this honor for the third year in a row. Fans of Lendemain de Veille won't be surprised by this. Anyone who's seen them perform on stage knows that their talent is memorable. Whether they're performing original compositions or covers of the best of Quebec's classics...
Oh, this is Quebec at its finest. Over 2 million people are starving, lining up at food banks, and they're sitting here once again talking about how amazing their art is. Quebec, we have fantastic performances, and we have fantastic artists, and we have all of this fantastic liberal art stuff going on here. My God, they are so out of touch, and they continue to show how out of touch they are when they do stuff like this.
The Honourable Member for Argenteuil-La Petite Nation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I recently found out that the traditional music group Le Diable à Cinq, well known in Quebec and originally from Ripon in my riding, well, I found out that they've been selected to represent Canada at the World Expo 2025 in Osaka, Japan. It's one of the most prestigious events in the world. It will be held in May of 2025. What an honor! They will be part of the National Arts Centre delegation, along with Pierre Lapointe, Lisa Leblanc, Dominique Fils-Aimé, and Élie Sapie, among others. They will perform several times at the Canada Pavilion during the expo. Le Diable à Cinq has performed about 150 concerts everywhere in Canada. Dominique Fils-Aimé, and Élie Sapie, among others. They will perform several times at the Canada Pavilion.
I swear, if CPAC doesn't get their feed fixed, it just briefly went down there again. Oh, there it goes again! There it goes again! Oh my goodness. I'm speechless right now, guys. This is just pathetic. This is just awful. This is the 8th time now. Wow. They still haven't fixed it. This has been happening for nearly 2 hours. 2 hours of the feed dropping, and they still haven't figured out what's wrong.
To serve his country, and was elected as a Reform Member of Parliament. John served as the chair of the Public Accounts Committee for many years, exposing corruption in the sponsorship scandal and publishing his widely read...
I'm not sure what's happening. I think they're having some sort of issues over in the House of Commons. The feed, the CPAC stream keeps disconnecting. It keeps going down momentarily. I have no idea. Let's get back into it, though. Thank you all for joining and sticking around through all the issues of today.
And his children, Alan, Monroe, and Vienna. John was also a man of deeply held Christian convictions, and his courageous stand for the truth, both secular and spiritual, will not be forgotten. You have served your country and your God well. Rest in peace, John.
The Honourable Member for Ottawa-Vanier. Mr. Speaker, today I pay tribute to Michel Brault, a dedicated, exceptional constituent of Ottawa-Vanier. He had a huge heart, and he passed away on October 29th of cancer. He was a lover of cars. He had his own car rental and maintenance franchise. He was also a longtime volunteer of Gloucester Centre Minor Hockey Association. He did everything he could to ensure that young people could have access to hockey. He was very interested in accessibility and inclusiveness, and as he was also president of the Hockey Association Centre. He even created a program for young Syrian refugees and others to be able to play hockey. The Government of Canada even recognized that project. He is so passionate, and even through his illness, he continued his projects with passion. Every one of his family members, I offer them my deepest condolences. We will miss you very much, and thank you for having inspired us every day.
The Honourable Member from Humber River Black Creek.
Mr. Speaker, media freedom advocate and newspaper publisher Jimmy Lai prepares to turn 77, yet he remains unjustly imprisoned in Hong Kong. By the end of this year, he will have endured 4 years in solitary confinement, a condition deemed tortured by...
Randy might be in the $9 million bathtub in the sky. He very well might be.
Mr. Lai, he has been an outspoken critic of human rights violations by the Chinese government, giving voice to those seeking a brighter future for Hong Kong. He now faces a life sentence, deprived of precious time with his family and enduring deteriorating health. In December 2023, this House unanimously called for Mr. Lai's release and an end to his prosecution. I continue to stand in solidarity with Mr. Lai and reaffirm this call. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
Ever since the first Canadian traveled to space in 1984, our Canadian astronauts have held a special place in our hearts. Names like Chris Hadfield and Roberta Bonder are synonymous with the values of courage, curiosity, and hard work. Just 14 Canadian men and women have traveled to space, but that number will soon be 15 thanks to Henry Wolfond, who on Friday will venture beyond the limits of this Earth as part of Blue Origin's New Shepard mission. A successful businessman, a lawyer, a fierce community advocate, and a family man, Henry will soon be able to add astronaut to his already impressive CV. This isn't the apex of his incredible story, it's just the beginning, and I would tell him that the sky is the limit, but for someone as extraordinary as him, even that's not enough. As Henry embarks on this mission, he will see the Earth from above, without any dividing lines or the conflicts that separate us on his journey of his own campaign to end the pervasive...
No dividing lines, huh? Sounds kinda commie to me.
Hank, good luck, Godspeed, and may all parts of your mission be a resounding success.
The Honourable Member from Winnipeg South Centre.
Mr. Speaker, earlier today I was honored to join senior leaders from the Canadian Museum for Human Rights as we celebrate the 10th year that this iconic building has been open to the public. The CMHR has played a profound role in helping us understand who we are, where we have been, and where the road to progress lies for the future. Through beautifully crafted exhibits and world-class educational programming, visitors are introduced to powerful stories and narratives that shed light on our shared humanity. In particular, the museum's advancement in helping us understand the history of Indian residential schools has played a major role in supporting the journey towards truth and reconciliation. The witness blanket, made from hundreds of items reclaimed from residential schools, churches, and other cultural displays across Canada, is but one of the many moving displays that ground visitors in the importance of the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. Mr. Speaker, our history is not void of failures that have caused immense harm to generations both past and present. The CMHR serves a critical role in helping us move forward with hope and conviction in pursuit of a better world for all. Congratulations on 10 years of service to our beautiful country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley.
Anti-Semitic violence threatening the lives of Jewish Canadians has now come to Parliament Hill. The RCMP foiled a plot to detonate a homemade bomb built by ISIS terrorists during the Rally for Israel last December. After 9 years of this Prime Minister, hate crimes have increased by 251%, with 66% being directed towards Jews. Synagogues and Jewish schools are being firebombed. Canada's Jewish community has implored the government to act against this rising tide of hate. The Conservative members of the Public Safety Committee have asked for an emergency meeting to root out this evil. Every Jew has the right to live safe and free from harm. But Liberal members are shamefully blocking the meeting. It is frankly disgusting. Will the Liberal members of the Public Safety Committee do their job and keep Canada's Jews safe before a bomb actually goes off?
Why can't we just keep everybody safe here in our borders? Like, why do we always have to segregate and do all this weird shit?
Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup. Mr. Speaker, 9 years of this Liberal government means 9 years of failure when it comes to housing. The Liberal government Party doubled rent, mortgage payments, and down payments. A recent Habitat for Humanity survey revealed that 88% of Canadian renters feel that access to homeownership is out of reach for them. And 75% of those surveyed feel that they have to sacrifice basic needs like food and education in order to pay rent. It's a disgrace that this should be occurring in Canada, Mr. Speaker. In the throes of a housing crisis, Quebecers are no longer getting by. Last week, the Journal de Montréal reported that a Montrealer, after a 30-year career at a bank, is on the brink of homelessness. We have rent payments that are too high. There was a chiropractor. He worked as a chiropractor for 29 years, but then he needed to go and live with his parents. That was his only option. Liberals have failed when it comes to housing, Mr. Speaker, but we Conservatives will fix this.
The honourable member for Sault Ste. Marie.
Speaker, Christmas is still more than a month away, but Conservative MPs have already written to the big guy with great enthusiasm and hope. Their hope is for a stocking filled with the housing accelerator money that their communities will need to build new homes. But alas, these Conservative MPs, their mayors, communities have been grinched by the leader of the official opposition. Slinking down the chimney, the Grinch has removed all their hope, and not even Cindy Lou Who can change the Grinch's mind these days. Only 6 affordable homes for Canada, says the Grinch. But, Speaker, don't you worry. The big guy is leading the chorus and is delivering the homes that Canada needs, like in Sault Ste. Marie.
Gotta love the theatrics here within this guy's speech.
175 agreements in place. We're fast-tracking the construction of 750,000 more homes across Canada. Thank you very much, Speaker.
Order. The honourable member from Algoma, Manitoulin, Kapuskasing.
Mr. Speaker, Canada is home to some of the planet's most vital resources. Chief among them is our abundance of fresh water. Our Great Lakes, aquifers, and rivers are a critical part of our ecosystem and economy. Managing our water sources sustainably is vital, particularly in the face of potentially unsustainable industrial usage. Selon étude
According to a study by Statistics Canada, industrial water use accounts for 91.2% of total water use across our country, and it continues to climb.
The government recently launched the Canada Water Agency. Its mandate must remain focused on keeping a close eye on how climate change and industrial policy is impacting our freshwater resources, particularly after the American president-elect commented on diverting Canadian water to the U.S. In Algoma, Manitoulin, Kapuskasing, Lake Huron, Lake Superior, and hundreds of lakes and rivers and aquifers will be impacted by this work. We must treat this issue with urgency in order to protect and manage this vital resource for generations, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
L'honorable député de Lac-Saint-Jean.
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, Erwin Kotler has been living under police protection for over a month. That's what the Globe and Mail reported this morning. And this is because an authoritarian regime wants him dead. Mr. Kotler campaigns for human rights and against racism and anti-Semitism. He has incurred the wrath of the Iranian regime by calling for the Guardians of the Islamic Revolution to be placed on the list of terrorist entities in Canada and elsewhere in the world. The Guardians of the Islamic Revolution, who were involved in preparing the October 7th attack and who are responsible for the deaths of young women in Iran. We will never accept that people, regardless of their beliefs, should have their lives endangered because of their opinions. We unreservedly condemn the death threats against Mr. Kotler, and we condemn the growing temptation of foreign powers to commit political assassinations on Canadian and Quebec soil. Mr. Kotler, you are not alone.
The honourable member from Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Mr. Speaker, during his taxpayer-funded stay in South America, the Prime Minister attacked Canadians for not liking his costly carbon tax and even accused them of spreading misinformation. Meanwhile, his radical Environment Minister not only plans to quadruple the carbon tax, but also to introduce a brand new one, a global shipping tax. That's carbon tax number 3. All the while, Canadians are lining up.
Imagine imposing a carbon tax and still letting the absolute disaster that Jasper was happen, letting all of it burn down. What a joke.
Democracy agenda. It's time to elect a common sense conservative government. It's time to restore the promise of Canada. It's time for a carbon tax election.
The honourable member from Winnipeg North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to talk about a bad idea. Members will know that the leader of the Conservative Party had another idea, Mr. Speaker, and this one's a real winner. Let's talk about the Housing Accelerator Fund. What is it that the leader of the Conservative Party is saying? That he's going to kill it. He's going to tag or get rid of that particular program. What he needs to do is to start listening to what Conservatives are actually saying. Let me tell the leader of the Conservative Party what they are saying. If by any chance I attend a municipal housing announcement funded by a Liberal initiative, I would be in a lot of trouble. Another one says it's extremely frustrating. One Conservative source told Radio Canada, MPs are...
Man, Kevin is so deranged, he just screams all the time. There is no off button. It's just always on yelling.
It's conservatives, the progressive conservatives, to get behind the Housing Accelerator Fund. Better yet, do a flip-flop and support the program. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order.
Greg's not happy.
Oral questions, questions.
Question period has begun. Let's go.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is still acting like a firefighter who's setting fires. Now he's blaming immigration on bad actors instead of himself. He decided to open the door to 725,000 asylum seeker requests in 5 years. He approved a 211% increase in international students. He allowed foreign workers in communities with high levels of unemployment. If there are bad actors, should he not look in the mirror? The Honourable Minister of Immigration. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think that Canadians expect any responsible government to take decisive actions, and you saw the levels I tabled last week, a 20% decrease in permanent resident, and the PBO himself has said that we have to meet our housing needs, and the member across the way wants to go to election. He has no plan. Perhaps in terms of math, he said that they'll build 6 units and he can count to 6. So, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Maniac masquerading as a firefighter, this time on immigration. He blames bad actors for his decisions on that destroyed our immigration system. He decided to increase and open the door to 726% more asylum claims. He decided to approve 211% more international students. He decided to lift the ban on temporary foreign workers in communities with already high unemployment. If the Prime Minister is hunting for the quote-unquote bad actors who ruined the system, will he have a look in the mirror?
Oh, let the clown look in the mirror.
Refugees and citizenship. Mr. Speaker, I don't think we'll take any lessons from someone who spent the last 20 years lighting fires in the House of Commons. That's it. We put forward a plan 2 weeks ago to reduce immigration levels by 20%. Canadians expect us to be responsible and to react to their needs. That's what we're doing with this plan. The Parliamentary Budget Officer himself has said that this new plan will reduce housing needs by 50%. That's what Canadians want. It's responsible.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Employment Minister first denied that he and his company were profiting off government business, and then text messages showed the contrary. They referred to a Randy. Well, he claimed that it was another Randy. We now know there is no other Randy. We know he falsely claimed he was Indigenous in order so that his company could steal resources that were meant for real Indigenous people. And now his company address matches the address of a place that was the location of 2 cocaine busts. Any one of these things would be a resigning offense. Why won't he resign now?
Yo, give it to him. Trudeau hanging out with Pablo Escobar.
The Honourable Minister for Employment and Workforce Development.
Mr. Speaker, know the person referred to in today's article. I've never met that person. I've had no dealings with her whatsoever. Those are the facts.
You are Randy. You are Randy.
Order.
We found the Randy.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Apparently, the person he doesn't know is himself. He says that he's not the Randy in the text messages, but his own business associates say there is no other Randy.
No, it's the other Randy.
He said that he was Indigenous in order that he could get grants and contracts that were meant just for Indigenous people. Now he admits he's not Indigenous at all. And now, while his company has the same address as a place that has 2 cocaine busts, he says he doesn't know the person involved in that address either. Does this minister even know who he is?
The Honourable Minister for Employment and Workforce Development.
Mr. Speaker, the article states...
Now ask all members, please. There's the Honourable Minister for Employment and Workforce Development from the top.
Mr. Speaker, I don't know the person referred to in the article today. I've never met her. I've had no dealings with her whatsoever. The article states that fact, and that is the fact.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
After the Prime Minister took his private jet, burned 105 tons of jet fuel, and emitted 300 tons of greenhouse gases to go down to Brazil, he claimed that Canadians who are opposed to his carbon tax are just confused by disinformation. No, Canadians aren't stupid, Mr. Speaker. They know that the Parliamentary Budget Officer has calculated that 100% of middle-class Canadians pay more in the tax than they get back. The Prime Minister already also said, though, that this will be the subject of the next election. I couldn't agree more. So why don't we have a carbon tax election now?
The Honourable Minister for...
Order. Greg is not going to be a happy camper.
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources. And
thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, it would be nice if the Leader of the Opposition was not spouting disinformation and misinformation in the House. At the end of the day, 8 out of 10 Canadian families, the vast majority of Canadians, get more money back. It is those that actually live on the most modest incomes that are the best off as a result of the price on pollution. But I would also say it is a price on pollution. It is about addressing climate change, something that that organization across the way simply has no idea how to do and does not care.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. The next few hours will be critical for our agriculture. Senators Peter Boehm and Peter Harder have literally sabotaged Bill C-282. They amended it to prevent it from protecting supply management in existing trade agreements. Imagine, while Donald Trump wants to reopen NAFTA, these guys want to serve him supply management on a silver platter. The Senate could vote on this amendment as early as tomorrow, so all the party leaders have to speak out, starting with the Prime Minister. Will he ask the senators to defeat the amendment and save supply management? The Honourable Government House Leader. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, on this side of the House, we're asking senators to support Bill C-282 in its original form, because we do believe in supply management. We believe in our farmers in Canada, whether it's dairy farmers or others, to ensure that they do have protection. We agree with the Bloc, and we want to pass this legislation in its original form. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Their excuse is that they're saying that the independence of senators is at stake, but they appointed them, and they are sabotaging C-82. One of them even advised the Prime Minister. And what's more, they're both fighting to sponsor government bills. So let's be serious. The Prime Minister can and must demand that senators pass Bill C-282 as voted by all parties in this House. We're talking about the future of supply management. It's serious. Will all the leaders in this House demand that senators vote against this amendment? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague, this House, Canadians, they know that a Liberal government will vote for this bill in its full form, and it's a good question. Will the Conservative Party leader ask the Conservative senators, to vote for this bill in its original integral form? Order, please. The Honourable Member for Rosemont-La Petite Patrie. Mr. Speaker, people are having a hard time making ends meet. Rents have doubled, and grocery prices just don't make sense anymore. Clearly, the Liberals have let people down. And the Conservatives, they're going to cut everything, down as well, including the Canada Child Benefit and dental care. Who's going to pay the price? Quebecers. We at the NDP are going to eliminate taxes on basic products like food, hydro, internet, and cell phone bills. Will the Liberals eliminate the GST on basic necessities? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our colleague is right in terms of the importance of supporting the middle class and all those who are working hard to join it. And that is why it's really sad to see the Conservatives voting against dental care. And the NDP also worked really hard to put it in place. So 1 million Quebecers now have their dental care card, and they want to move forward with this in 2025. We're going to sign up more Quebecers and Canadians between 18 years and up.
The Honourable Member from Vancouver Kingsway.
Mr. Speaker, working and now middle-class families are cutting back on their groceries. They're getting less and getting gouged at the till by greedy CEOs. Liberals let this happen and are letting families down. Conservatives will cut and cost families even more. They'll take away important services like dental care, costing families thousands of dollars a year. The NDP's tax-free essentials plan removes the GST from grocery items to bring families relief. Will the Liberals take the tax off grocery items so Canadians can get a break?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, I would agree with the member that what we're going to see from the Conservative is cut, Mr. Speaker. Right. They're going to cut dental care. They're going to cut child benefit. Mr. Speaker, Canadians at home know that on this side of the House, we will always stand for the middle class. We will always stand on those who are working hard to join the middle class. We will fight for Canadians as we've done on grocery. We will build more homes, Mr. Speaker. We will create economic opportunities. We will fight for workers. We will create jobs. We will create opportunities and possibilities for this country so the middle class can thrive, Mr. Speaker.
9 years.
a couple of occasions I've caught the voice of the honourable member from New Westminster.
It's funny, they claim they're going to do all that stuff, build homes, all this, bring opportunities back, jobs. They've had 10 years to do that, and they've done the exact opposite.
Honourable member from Thornhill.
It seems like every time the employment minister finds rock bottom, it keeps getting worse. First, he said he wasn't the Randy involved in his company, but we know there was only one Randy at his company. He said he wasn't involved with his company while in cabinet, and text messages reveal that he is. He said that he was Indigenous to profit from government contracts stealing from First Nations communities, and now there's new news of coordinating business activities with drug smugglers and convicts. This is the behavior of a low-life fraud, not a federal cabinet minister. Simple question. How does that guy still have his job?
How do any of them over there on that side still have their job with the condition Canada is currently in? Ooh.
Order. Order.
Oh, we got some drama. Greg is looking happy as always.
For Employment and Workforce Development.
Mr. Speaker, despite the innuendo, here are the facts. I don't know the person in question. I never met that person in question. And Mr. Speaker, those are simply the facts. The article even says that I've never met the person in question. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Thornhill.
Speaker, here are the facts. He flaunts the ethics rules. He claims a false identity. He gets caught in a web of lies. That's what the Prime Minister rewards after 9 years. With each passing day, we find out more about the Employment Minister's scams and schemes, and we learn that he's just a phony and a fraud. Canadians want to know. Indigenous communities who stole from him, who he stole from, want to know. And Liberal backbenchers want to know when the Prime Minister is going to fire that Cabinet Minister.
The Honourable Minister for Employment and Workforce Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't know the person in the article from today. I've never met the person in the article from today. Those are the facts. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives may not like it, but it's actually in the article that I don't know the person in question. Never met them.
The Honourable Member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
The Liberal minister from Alberta is a fake and a fraud. He said he was not the Randy involved in his company, but we know that there's only one Randy. He said he wasn't involved in his company at the cabinet table.
Oh.
I'm going to ask.
Wow.
Colleagues.
Greg's going to start muting.
Today we've been skating close to the line in terms. Excuse me, colleagues. I will start my comment again if you would give me the privilege of listening. At several occasions today, we've been skating close to the line in terms of what's acceptable language. The honourable member from Leeds Grenville, I think, has skated over that line and accusing a direct member. Can I ask the honourable member to withdraw that comment and start his question from the top?
Oh, come on, Greg. What are you doing?
We start, Speaker, that this Liberal minister from Alberta has been implicated in fraud in media reports. Today, we've seen that. It's very clear.
I'm just going to, I'm not certain if, I was having trouble hearing the member. I don't think I heard the withdraw. If he could withdraw and start again, I'd appreciate it. If members were not to take the floor while a member is being recognized, the speaker will be able to hear the member. The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Withdrawing the previous words, Speaker, we'll talk about this Liberal minister from Alberta who has been implicated in media reports in fraud. Some of them he's even apologized for. He misrepresented his identity, claiming to be Indigenous, trying to steal contracts from people who are in fact Indigenous. This same minister said that he wasn't the Randy at his own company. We know that there was only one Randy at that company. It's pandemic profiteering. We know that there's allegations of fraud. Why is it that this Prime Minister just won't fire that minister?
The honourable minister for Employment and Workforce Development.
Mr. Speaker, what the member opposite just said is simply not true.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
Come up with an actual response.
That with the cocaine connections to the Liberal minister from Alberta, that those Liberals, that Prime Minister, want to allow him to continue to be in cabinet. He said that he was Indigenous to try and steal contracts from individuals who are Indigenous. That's okay as long as you are a Liberal. The company is involved in more than half a dozen lawsuits because of fraud, and that's okay as long as you're a Liberal. They came before committee and said things that we now know weren't true, like it must have been some other Randy. If he won't resign, why won't this Prime Minister fire that fraudster?
Again, members at the very last possible moment used a word which would not be considered. Would not be considered.
I knew it was going to be rowdy today. I knew it was going to be an absolute circus today.
Withdraw that last word.
Withdrawing another comment.
I'll withdraw the last word. He should be fired.
I thank the honourable member, the honourable minister for employment and workforce development.
Mr. Speaker, what the member opposite said, once again, is not true.
The honourable member from Mégantic-Les Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Official Languages campaigned as a successful entrepreneur, but he's an imposter. We know that he said he wasn't involved in his company when he was a minister, but the text messages show the opposite. He was taking money destined for First Nations communities. He said he was a journalist even though he was a lobbyist. When will the Prime Minister fire this professional fake?
The
Honourable Minister of Employment and Workforce Development. Mr. Speaker, despite the insinuations, I have never met that person in question in today's article. I have never dealt with her. I've never met her. Those are the facts. The honourable member from Mégantic-Les Mr. Speaker, there are so many Randys that they didn't even understand the question I asked him. But the Minister of Official Languages presented himself as a successful entrepreneur and journalist, but he said he worked for Radio-Canada and Les Affaires, and even the editor-in-chief of Les Affaires said it was obvious he wasn't a journalist. He was uncovered, even though the Prime Minister made many efforts to protect him. When will the Prime Minister fire his fake minister? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, the statements of that member are false.
À l'ordre, s'il vous plaît.
Order, please.
Saint-Jean.
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is unable to acknowledge that he's responsible for the crises caused by the rapid increase in immigration. Even in his mea culpa yesterday, he was still looking for someone to blame. It's the pandemic's fault. It's the fault of businesses or schools. Yet he's the one who issued every permit. He's the one who took over McKinsey's immigration targets despite our warnings. He's the one who raised the targets to 500,000 people a year despite warnings from his own civil service. When will he finally admit that he's the one who's responsible? The Honourable Minister of Immigration. Mr. Speaker, I think the member has spent a little too much time in Ottawa to say that the federal government controls absolutely everything, but he knows in full well that the government of Quebec also controls things. We do have our side of the responsibility. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. It's not as if anyone had told him to be careful with the immigration targets. His own officials warned him back in 2022 that his immigration thresholds would exacerbate the crises in housing and access to public services. The Bloc has been warning him for years that taking on the Century Initiative's immigration targets would be totally irresponsible. Quebec has been warning him for 2 years that our welcoming capacity has been exceeded. Does the Prime Minister realize now that we wouldn't be facing the current crisis if he had listened and thought things through instead of insulting everyone? The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Citizenship and Refugees. Well, in terms of their ability to welcome people, if we had listened to provincial governments, there might have been a significant increase, because the last time CAC mentioned this, when they made decreases, they had, well, now they're facing the situation with the international students, and it's a shared situation. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. It's confusing. The Prime Minister couldn't have just acted faster on immigration. He should have acted faster. He should have considered the capacity of the country before drastically increasing the population as he did. Second, he should have listened to all the people's warnings that it wasn't working, but he was too blinded by his own multiculturalist pipe dream to base his immigration policies on facts and reality. Does he realize that yesterday's mea culpa is far too little, far too late, and far too easy after so much irresponsibility? The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Citizenship and Refugees. Let's remind everyone of the facts. Since 2009, the Quebec government tripled immigration in some areas that they control. These are the facts where we're going to work together to reduce this. The plan that I put forward last week proposes a 20% reduction. It's responsible, it's important, it's what Canadians and Quebecers are asking us for.
The Honourable Member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
The Minister from Edmonton is a fake and a phony. He said that he was not the Randy...
I'm going to ask, this is a couple of times that I've asked the honourable members. I'm going to ask the honourable members again to remember, when they speak directly to members, they have to be, of course, extend to them all the respect that each member, as members, are deserving of. So I'm going to ask the honourable member, please, to rephrase this question to start from the top.
Mr. Speaker, this minister deserves to be criticized in the People's House, the House of Commons. He said he was not the Randy involved in his company, but we know there's only one Randy at the company. He said he wasn't involved in the operations of the company, but text messages reveal that he is. He said he was Indigenous to profit from government contracts, trying to steal from First Nations communities. When will the Prime Minister fire this phony for making false claims to steal from First Nations?
I'm going to invite all members to be very judicious in terms of their use of their language in this place. The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my colleague has addressed this issue and stated that those claims...
The crocodile lady and the crocodile tears. Wow.
...was never listed as...
What a sad time to be a Canadian, honestly.
And in fact received no funding from the Government of Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Good answer.
Oh, enough out of you, Freeland. Nobody wants to hear you speak. Oh, Greg's muted the House. We have a mute from Greg, ladies and gentlemen. He is about to give the smackdown.
The Honourable Member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Oh, maybe not.
The company did actually receive funding from the Government of Canada. The Minister of Employment's business partner claimed that their company was fully Indigenous owned. How would he have gotten that impression? Maybe because the Liberal Party repeatedly said that the minister was Indigenous. Now, it is possible to get kicked out of the Liberals' Indigenous caucus, not for corruption, but for refusing to participate in corruption, as Jody Wilson-Raybould found out. After 9 years, they've gone from firing the first Indigenous Attorney General to keeping the first fake Indigenous Minister of Employment. When will the Prime Minister fire this phony minister?
Way! He's fired up. He's fired up.
I'm going to...
Colleagues.
I'm going to encourage all members to be more judicious in their use of their words and referring directly to other members. The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Service Public,
Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our colleague knows full well that in the House we have to choose the right words to express things properly. He would like to, if he'd like to know more about the procurement process in favor of Indigenous companies, what's really important for Canadians, he should ask it so in a respectful way, and I would be happy to meet with him to explain to him how things work. I will encourage the honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent, please, to not speak until he's recognized by the chair.
The honourable member from Edmonton West.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's only minister from Alberta is accused of being a fake and a fraud. The member from Edmonton Centre said he wasn't the Randy involved in his company. Yet we know he is the only Randy involved in that company. He said he wasn't involved with his company while in cabinet, yet text messages clearly show that he was. Right. He pretended to be Indigenous to profit from government contracts, effectively stealing from First Nations businesses. Mr. Speaker, enough is enough. When will the Prime Minister do his job and fire that minister?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, as I said, my colleague has addressed those issues that the colleague raises, and he has clarified that they are false. Mr. Speaker, we have stated that that business was not listed as an Indigenous business, and it did not receive funding through that program. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very good.
I think I just heard somebody mocking Freeland.
Centre.
Mr. Speaker, families are getting gouged on essentials by greedy CEOs. Yeah. Liberals have let families down. And the Conservatives, all they're planning to do is cut like the National School Food Program, making kids go hungry. But there's good news, Mr. Speaker. The NDP's plan to remove GST on life essentials like kids, clothing and diapers will bring relief to so many families. Right. Will the Liberals follow the NDP's lead and cut the GST so families can get ahead?
The Honourable Minister for Families and Children.
As the members rightly pointed out, on this side of the House, we're moving forward with a national school food program, which we've heard again and again the leader of the Conservative Party call bureaucracy. Bureaucracy, Mr. Speaker, is not what is happening. We are seeing thousands of children already this school year receive food at school because of this investment in our children. We'll continue to work with the provinces to see this roll out across the country, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Skeena, Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, Canadian families are getting gouged on essentials while the biggest corporations are posting massive profits. And the Liberals could have prevented this, but instead they've let Canadians down. Now, Conservative cuts would make matters far worse. In fact, cutting childcare alone would cost Canadian families up to $13,000 per child. The NDP has a plan to take the GST off essentials like home heat, phone and internet bills, kids' clothing. Will the Liberals do it?
The Honourable Minister for Families, Children and Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, it's great to hear this member speak about the importance of the investments that we've made in childcare. Mr. Speaker, we've seen almost 1 million families. These are real people, Mr. Speaker, that we've been able to support to get them into affordable, high-quality childcare, saving them thousands of dollars each and every year. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives have made it clear they do not support affordable childcare. They will do everything they can to take this away from the families that need it.
I'm going to invite ministers and members of the opposition to have their conversations outside and not on over the floor while someone else is speaking or has the microphone. Then the honourable member from Fleetwood, Port Kells.
Mr. Speaker, we found out the Conservative leader is silencing his own caucus, barring them from promoting federal housing funds in their own constituencies. One Conservative MP told CBC MPs are being stopped from helping their cities for partisan reasons. Conservative MPs, like the member for Kelowna Lake Country, whose community is receiving over $31 million in federal funding through the Housing Accelerator Fund, have had a pretty rough time back in the riding. So, can the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities tell us about the impact Conservative leaders' cuts would have on Kelowna?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
You may have seen the news, Mr. Speaker, but last week the Conservatives had a very bad week. First, their leader went out in public to announce that he was cutting billions of dollars in funding directly to communities to build more homes, but later it was revealed that his MPs were advocating for that fund and were since banned from advocating on behalf of their communities. I don't know about you, Mr. Speaker, but my constituents want to make sure that they're the boss, not the leader of our party up here. It seems that is not true. But when we look at the example in Kelowna, let's take a look at what the mayor said. To replace this funding, he would need to look at other options like borrowing, reserves, or tax increases. Tax increases on the Conservative side, money for communities.
It's very clear to the Speaker that everybody got a lot of rest during this last week. I'm going to ask members, please, once again, don't take the floor unless they're being addressed. The honourable member, for the honourable member from Sturgeon River Parkland.
Well, Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, it's clear that this NDP Liberal government isn't worth the cost or the corruption. Now we have a Minister of Employment who says he sees nothing, he hears nothing, he knows nothing, but there's too much here to pass up. First, he claimed he wasn't the other Randy, implicated in his business partner's text messages. We now know that he was. Then he claimed that he had no active role in his company's operations while he served in cabinet. We now know that he did. And we now know that he claimed Indigenous heritage and status, and it was a complete fabrication. These attempts to steal funds earmarked for Indigenous companies is fraudulent. When will it be enough for this Prime Minister? When will he fire this minister?
The Honourable Minister for Public Works and Procurement.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Deux premières.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Two things. First of all, what the member just said is false. And secondly, the minister has explained himself repeatedly. What we have still not heard today is why the Conservative leader still has taken hundreds of days to get his security briefing, not just to protect himself, but to protect his own members. His only priority is to trigger an election. How can he expect to hold an election without being able to protect the security of his party and his members?
From Sturgeon River Parkland.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this minister keeps explaining himself, but the answers aren't coming. The minister's facing multiple scandals. We know that his company has been charged with fraud. We know that he was illegally involved while he served in cabinet. We know that the minister for years claimed that he had Indigenous heritage, and we now know that's a complete fabrication. And today we learned that the minister's company shared a post office box with a known international cocaine dealer. At best, the minister has shown abhorrent judgment, and at worst, he is completely corrupt. The fact that this Prime Minister continues to have confidence in him demonstrates exactly why he's not fit to lead this country. When will this Prime Minister fire this minister?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, my colleague has stated that those are all false and he did not know this person in question. But if you want to talk about fit for leadership, he should be asking his own leader why he has not yet gotten a security clearance. Because if that's someone who wants to lead the country, they should probably know what risks are facing Canadians. Mr. Speaker, Canadians are wondering why the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada has not gotten a security clearance. Thank you,
Yes, they are wondering that.
The honourable member from Dauphin, Swan River, Neepawa.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, the NDP Liberals are not worth the cost. The Prime Minister is jetting around the globe promoting his failed carbon tax while Canadians line up at the food banks. According to the Prime Minister, the carbon tax is, quote, the best tool out there, and anyone who disagrees is using, quote, propaganda. But Canada's Environment Commissioner disagrees. He revealed the Liberals will not meet their own emission targets despite quadrupling the carbon tax.
That's right.
It's all pain and no gain. So will the Prime Minister call a carbon tax election?
Good question. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's disingenuous for the Conservatives to continually link the food bank situation in Canada with carbon pricing. There's a 108-page report that they produced. The Food Banks Canada came forward and made 4 recommendations around Canada's social safety net. And not once in that 108-page report did they mention the carbon tax or carbon pricing, because they know that Canada's carbon rebate that comes out 4 times a year supports Canadians, particularly lower and middle income Canadians, Mr. Speaker. They should cut out the misinformation and stop being so disingenuous, particularly on the backs of lower income Canadians.
He was so confident with those lies he just said right there. Oh my God.
Years of this Liberal government's posturing, Canada has the worst environmental performance in the G7. The Environment Commissioner found that emissions reductions weren't because of anything government did. They're thanks to a review of data and a change in methodology. In short, Mr. Speaker, the 2 Liberal carbon taxes don't work, and now the government's planning a 3rd carbon tax. An overall export tax. If they're so sure of themselves, why don't they call an election on it? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment. Thank you for the question, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for that question. It's a very important question. Canada's performance and industry's performance when it comes to climate change is important.
The oil and gas sector is the one that's continually increasing their emissions, and we're challenging the oil and gas industry with a pollution cap. We're asking them to invest some of their astonishing $66 billion in profit in making their products more efficient and lowering the carbon intensity of their oil. That's a good challenge, Mr. Speaker.
Well said, well said.
L'honorable député de...
The Honourable Member for Trois-Rivières. Mr. Speaker, the media recently reported that fraudsters were taking full advantage of CRA and claiming bogus tax refunds. According to Radio-Canada, the agency hasn't understood the need to clean up its act. Instead of going after fraud and malpractice, they've launched a witch hunt to find out who's talking to reporters. Managers have even gone so far as to spy on employees' computers. They don't want to deal with the problem, they just want to shoot the messengers. Will the minister ask the agency to track down on fraudsters instead of whistleblowers? The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are situations that need to be reported, and that's why we supported a block bill. But, Mr. Speaker, if I were to publicly share information that comes under the Income Tax Act, I could be liable to 7 years imprisonment. Mr. Speaker, employee staff, agency staff also need to protect the tax base, so it's important to remind them of their duties and obligations. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Trois-Rivières. Imagine fraudsters have gotten millions of dollars in bogus tax refunds because CRA didn't check before transferring the money. So the agency wrote to its staff not to ask them to tighten up the checks, to ask them to keep their mouths shut. Management thinks the main problem isn't fraud, it's the media. We need accountability, and accountability starts with protecting whistleblowers, not fraudsters. Will the minister do something about the total lack of ethics in CRA senior management? The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague is mixing things up. There are 2 very distinct things here, but I can assure him that when it comes to CRA, we take fraud very seriously. We have very professional teams working on fraud. We have strategies. We work in partnership with the RCMP, with financial institutions, with our international partners. There are a number of levels of security to catch these fraudsters, and I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, that the agency is a prime target, obviously, with the benefits and the checks that we pay out, but we are doing a good job all the same.
The Honourable Member from Battlefords, Lloydminster.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, the NDP Liberals are not worth the cost. Now, the Prime Minister got on his taxpayer-funded carbon-emitting jet, flew to Brazil, and bragged about how great his punitive carbon tax is. His carbon tax has done nothing for the environment while literally making life's basic necessities unaffordable. The Prime Minister called it the best tool out there, but the only tool that Canadians want is a ballot box. Will the Prime Minister call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canada's emissions are lower now than they've been since all of Connor McDavid's life. Last time they were this low was 1997. Our emissions are down because of industrial carbon pricing, because of pricing on consumer fuels, and because of the over 100 measures that this government has undertaken to lower our emissions and protect the environment. And what have the Conservatives done over that same time? They voted against every single measure, Mr. Speaker. It's not just us that think carbon pricing is effective, it's also William Nordhaus, who has a Nobel Prize to prove it. So if even one Conservative economist, if they could find one that said they've got a solution for fighting climate change, we'd love to hear it.
Absolutely.
The Honourable Member from Battleford's Lloydminster.
Under this Prime Minister's carbon tax regime, grocery prices have skyrocketed to the point that scurvy is now a serious health concern in Canada. 27 cases of scurvy have been identified in northern Saskatchewan. The Prime Minister wants to blame, quote, propaganda, misinformation, and flat-out lies for opposition to his carbon tax. But unlike him, Canadians do not get to turn a blind eye to the affordability challenges that they face. Will the Prime Minister show some compassion and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Canada is second in the G7 on health span, second only to Japan. We're 1 year longer than both France and Italy in terms of the number of years we live in good health. We are 2 years better than the United Kingdom. We are 6 years longer than the United States. You know, when you're talking about things that have been gone for a long time, let's talk about what's happening with measles. Let's talk about what's happening with misinformation generally. The approach to attacking public health that the Conservatives are taking, the attack on information, puts lives at risk and fundamentally endangers our health system, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Toronto St. Paul's.
Fact. This Liberal Prime Minister is out of touch. First, he gets on a gas-guzzling jet. Then, he glorifies the punishing carbon tax that Canadians pay. And everyone who disagrees, he says, quote, they're using propaganda, misinformation, and flat-out lies. Meanwhile, more than 1 in 10 people in Toronto are using food banks, and 87% of them are living in unaffordable housing. Enough is enough. Why won't the Prime Minister treat Canadians like adults, let them decide, and call a carbon tax election now?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is a fact that 300 economists in this country have all said that a price on pollution is an effective way to reduce emissions, and the majority of Canadians actually get more money back in rebates. It is a fact that the parliamentary budget...
Well, he's just going to say the same thing he always does. 8 out of 10 Canadians receive more on the carbon tax rebate, which is absolutely not true. The 4 installments you receive, I received about $140 to $150, which isn't enough to fill 1 tank of gas. It's not enough for 1 week of groceries. Hell, even a fucking couple days of groceries if you want to really break it down. What's up, Go Do Stuff? How are you doing? Sup at Windy Talks. Hope you had some good time away from the live streams. Yeah, it was a nice week off not listening to these people repeat the same 5 things over and over again. Especially on the Liberal side. They just talk a bunch of lies. They speak a bunch of gibberish.
Today, we announced a significant plan to invest in housing in Quebec, which will add thousands of social and affordable housing units to the
Yeah, I've been here. I've just been sitting back and listening. Greg hit the mute button on me.
announcement and the potential impact of the Conservative leaders' cuts for Quebecers. The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Good news, Mr. Speaker. We announced this morning $92 million being added to the historic agreement with Quebec. They're building 3,000 new housing units. It's a big problem for the Conservative leader who says that that housing simply doesn't exist. What would the Conservative leader do that would affect the Conservative members from Quebec, where there are hundreds of these housing units currently being built? How long are they going to put up with this?
The honourable member from Kelowna Lake Country.
After 9 years, the NDP Liberals are not worth the cost of housing. The failing Liberal housing plan is not building more homes. Housing starts are down last month compared to 2023. 11% in Canada, 30% in BC, and 87% in Kelowna. I've talked to home builders and residents in my community who all support the common sense Conservative plan to axe the GST on new homes sold under $1 million. Will the NDP Liberals agree with home builders and families and axe the GST on new homes sold?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
I am very happy to correct the record that my Conservative colleague has put on the floor of the House of Commons. Housing starts are actually up this month 8% compared to last month, and year over year are trending in a positive direction, near the all-time record home building pace that Canada has ever seen. Mr. Speaker, it's interesting that this question would come from this particular member who represents the city of Kelowna, which received $31.5 million to build thousands and thousands of more homes. Not only is she opposed to that investment, her leader is barring her and every one of her colleagues from advocating on behalf of their communities. I came here to represent my community in Ottawa, not to take my leader's words back home.
The honourable member from Brantford Brant.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. Police associations nationwide are demanding urgent bail legislation to keep our communities safe. Yet just this morning, a stolen BMW crashed into a Toronto bus, injuring 9 people, 2 critically. 2 of the 4 accused were, surprise, surprise, out on bail, including 1 for a violent robbery. If the safety and security of Canadians is no longer a priority for this Prime Minister, will he call an immediate election so that Conservatives can bring jail, not bail, for repeat violent offenders?
What a crazy country we live in, where they just let them out the next day and they continue to repeat the crimes with no consequences ever.
Public safety and community safety.
And this guy
What's
is just a
concerning
hack.
And what people need to understand is that calls for bail reform.
This guy
echoed in
is
this
the
chamber
biggest
18 months ago.
lying
We
hack
responded,
I have
tabled
ever
legislation,
seen.
And with the cooperation of all parties, we got it passed. Now the ball goes to the province's court. What we need to ensure is that that very person who should have been detained, did the Crown contest that bail? Did the Crown decide to appeal the bail if the bail decision was made in error? Was there enough space in detention facilities run by the province to hold that person in detention? These are important questions. We need answers.
You're the government. You should have the answers in terms of that.
And Caribou, please to not take the question, or not take the floor unless is recognised by the Speaker. L'honorable député de
The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Mr. Speaker, crime is everywhere in Canada, and the Liberal government is willfully blind. Even the leader of the Bloc says there's no crime in our regions. We read this morning that a mother will have to pay $7,000 a year for car insurance because her car has been stolen multiple times. It's always our constituents who end up paying for the inaction of this Liberal government. When will this Bloc Liberal government punish crime, even in rural Canada? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, our colleague is falsely using the term inaction. He knows full well that our government for many years now has been investing in the police, whether it's the RCMP, the CBSA, or even our provincial and municipal partners in fighting auto theft. This situation is wholly unacceptable to Canadians, and what's good news is that the number of cars being stolen is decreasing, but that's not enough. We will continue to do everything we can to support our police and put an end to this situation.
Honourable member from Scarborough Agincourt.
Mr. Speaker, from the rising cost of living to climate change, we know young people today face unique challenges. Their mental health needs are complex. Our government is making sure that young Canadians get the care they need, when and where they need it. It's a promise we put forward in 2021 to build a stronger, more resilient Canada. Today, the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions announced the launch of the Youth Mental Health Fund. Can she share details about this historic investment with the House?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the member from Scarborough Agincourt for being such a tremendous, unwavering advocate for mental health in this country. Mr. Speaker, community organizations are the lifeline when it comes to mental health that's local and that is trusted. This fund, $500 million investment, once in a generation, to make a difference for our youth, to make sure that they have access to the services that they trust the most, adding capacity, filling gaps, and making sure we meet them where they're at. Mr. Speaker, when we talk about the youth of today, we want to make sure that they have the tools that they need to thrive, because when they thrive, Canada succeeds.
Bravo. Brilliant. The Honourable Member from Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, a UN report has found that Israel's warfare in Gaza is consistent with the characteristics of genocide. The Liberal government is legally obligated by the Genocide Convention to prevent and stop Netanyahu's attack on Palestinians. Turning a blind eye to mass casualties is not an option. Entire families have been decimated. Children are starving to death. When will the Liberals live up to their obligations, sanction Netanyahu and his extreme cabinet, and finally put in place an actual arms embargo?
Have I noticed what, Alan?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, before he takes the
I don't know what happened,
floor,
but all of a sudden everything is so much louder than it was.
About what they wear in this House to ensure that it's not considered a prop. The Honourable Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I think everyone in this House realizes that the situation in Gaza is dire, that the situation faced by men, women, and children in Gaza is horrendous, and we will continue to seek every possible way to find peace, peace with justice in this situation. However, rhetoric doesn't help, symbols don't help. Hard work, diplomacy, and engagement will be what Canada needs to do on this every day. We'll continue to do our part to bring peace in the world. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, it stuttered a couple times there. I thought it was gonna go down again, but it seems like everything has returned to normal. I don't know what was happening earlier. The stream was going down almost every 20-30 minutes.
Many closed work permit holders have their renewal applications rejected for want of an impact assessment, either through ignorance or haste. They only find out about the problem at the deadline, and as a result, their application gets rejected. Why doesn't the department take the simple step of letting them know by email about the missing documents so as to avoid work interruptions, impacts on families and businesses, and unnecessary costs for businesses, immigrants, and government alike? The Honourable Minister of Employment. Mr. Speaker, it's very important for us to be able to have work permits when employers need them. So I will work with the member to help us solve this problem.
I see that the Honourable Minister is rising on a point of order. The Honourable Minister for International Development.
The Honourable Member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes, at the conclusion of asking his question, as he was sitting down, called the Minister of Employment and Workforce Development Cocaine Randy. That is extremely unparliamentary, and I ask
Cocaine Randy.
Him to withdraw that remark. Thank you very much.
Randy the Cocaine Cowboy.
I see that the member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes is rising in response to this point of order.
Speaker, I'm sure that I was referring to the other Randy as Cocaine Randy.
Oh, that was a sneaky way to get out of that one. I thought Greg was going for the mute button there. I saw that hand moving.
I will come back to this House after some further reflection. I see that the honourable member from Edmonton Strathcona is rising on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, and I'm deeply concerned. So you raised the issue of me wearing a pin in the House of Commons. I have to tell you that I stand here proudly wearing the pin that stands in solidarity with the Palestinian people, but people within this place are wearing pins for a various number of reasons. One of my colleagues is proudly wearing the moose hide pin to show his support for the causes that are important. You know, people wear poppies within this House. I have many times.
Don't even begin to dename the poppy like that, woman.
Order.
What a ass backwards comment that was. What the wow.
It's important for the chair to be able to hear the point that is raised by the honourable member from Edmonton Strathcona. I couldn't hear much after the reference to the poppy. I'm going to give the honourable member another 10 seconds.
Get her out of here, Greg.
So that the chair can hear this in order to make a proper determination.
Colleagues.
The honourable member.
Colleagues, please.
I'd like to point out, when I cannot, as a member of the House of Commons, bring up a point of order without being heckled and shouted down by the Conservatives, that imposes as well on my privilege. Now, I proudly...
Oh, here we go.
Mr. Speaker, I have proudly worn many pins in this House. For example, tomorrow, to mark 1,000 days since Putin invaded Ukraine, I will wear the Ukrainian pin. I need to know whether the Conservatives will call this out as a...
She's more concerned about wearing pins for other countries than probably wearing the poppy. What a bloody joke. What a bloody joke. What kind of point of order was that?
I thank the honourable member from Edmonton Strathcona. The chair will take that into consideration and will come back to the House if necessary. I saw the honourable minister rise on her feet for a point of order before I saw another honourable member. So the honourable member, the honourable president of the Treasury Board, Minister of Transport.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honour to submit a message from Her Excellency, the Governor General of Canada, signed by her own hand.
It's not that is not a point of order that the honourable member is rising.
Oh, Greg with the shutdown.
But it is not a point of order. I saw l'honorable député.
It's like the Wild West right now in here.
Lac Saint Jean. He's rising on a point of order. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There has been consultation amongst the parties, and I think you will say that there is unanimous consent with respect to the following motion, that the House pay tribute to the contribution of Mr. Erwin Cutler from the Human Rights Association and the Anti-Semitism Association, that in his role he condemns the death threats received to him by a foreign regime. All those opposed to the honourable member moving this motion, please say nay.
D'accord.
Agreed. The House will now has heard the motion. All those opposed to the motion will please say nay.
Adopté.
Carried. I see another member rising on a point of order, the honourable member or Minister of National Revenue. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a correction to an answer I gave earlier during question period. I missed some information that is protected in the Revenue Act It's a prison for 12 months. I appreciate that rectification from the Honourable Minister.
A member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan is rising on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to follow up on the point of order raised about pins that members wear in the House. In the past, different positions have been taken.
He's got a Fire Randy thing taped to his shirt.
So I see.
He's got a Fire Randy.
Honourable member is trying to make a point that was raised earlier. I did indicate to the House that I had heard points on this.
Oh my God, that was amazing.
If necessary on this matter.
The Fire Randy pin.
It being 3:22, the House will now proceed.
Greg hates his life right now. He's like, can this just end?
Related to the privilege motion. Excuse me. The Honourable.
And we got a mute again. Another mute in the House. Come on, Greg. What are you doing? This is ridiculous, man.
So as I was saying, call in the members.
And they're muting again. Are they doing a vote? Is that what's going on here? Are they going to disappear for 14 minutes and then come back with an electronic vote? Oh, we're doing something here. I don't know why we're muted, though.
The question is as follows. The question is on a sub-amendment. Mr. Scheer, seconded by Mr. Berthold, moved.
Oh, going back to the SDTC. Wow.
That the government's failure of fully providing documents as ordered by the House on June 10th, 2024.
My God, it's not going to go anywhere. This is never going to go anywhere, really. The SDTC is going to continue. This debate is going to continue.
That it be an instruction to the committee. A, that the following witnesses be ordered to appear before the committee separately for 2 hours each. 1, the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry. 2, the Clerk of the Privy Council. 3, the Privacy Commissioner of Canada, who respected the order of the House and deposited unredacted documents. 4, Paul McKinnon, the former Deputy Secretary to the Cabinet, Governance. 5, the Auditor General of Canada. 6, can I dispense?
Mr. Kimmich, appuyé par Mr.
Kimmich, seconded by Mr. Maguire. Move the following sub-amendment, that the amendment be amended by replacing the words Friday,
whatever you want,
November
dude, that's so
22nd, 2024. I'm getting to the end. With the following. The 30th sitting day following the adoption of this order.
Just briefly hopping over to Sunshine's channel, the House of Canada. I wanted to see what he was saying about the muting.
All those in favor of the sub-amendment will please rise.
Ms. Gould.
Mr. Macaulay-Cardigan.
Mr. Macaulay-Cardigan.
Ms. Anand.
Ms. Anand.
Ms. Hutchings.
Ms. Hutchings.
Ms. Tassie.
Ms. Tassie.
Mr. Virani.
Mr. Virani.
Ms. Chagger.
Ms. Chagger.
Ms. Murray.
Ms. Murray.
Ms. Scrow.
Ms. Scrow.
Mr. Casey.
Mr. Casey.
Mr. Vandal.
Mr. Vandal.
Ms. Kara.
Ms. Kara.
Ms. Sahota.
Ms. Sahota.
Madame Petipa-Taylor.
Yeah, they really need to just get rid of the mute button. That would be ideal.
Mr. Sheehan.
Mr. Oliphant.
Mr. Oliphant.
Mr. Lamoureux.
Mr. Lamoureux.
Mr. Fragascatos.
Mr. Fragascatos.
Mr. Brewson.
Mr. Brewson.
Mr. Baptiste.
Mr. Baptiste.
Mr. Lauzon.
Monsieur Lauzon.
Mr. May Cambridge.
Mr. May Cambridge.
Mr. El Khoury.
Monsieur El Khoury.
Mr. Hardy.
Mr. Hardy.
Mr. Johari.
Mr. Johari.
Mr. Badaway.
Mr. Badaway.
Mrs. Atwin.
Mrs. Atwin.
Mr. Kellaway.
Mr. Kellaway.
Mr. Sanson.
Monsieur Sanson.
Madame Brière.
Madame Brière.
Mr. Long.
Mr. Long.
Mr. Longfield.
Mr. Longfield.
Mr. McDonald Avalon.
Mr. McDonald Avalon.
Mr. McKinnon Coquitlam Port Coquitlam.
Mr. McKinnon Coquitlam Port Coquitlam.
Mr. McLeod.
Mr. McLeod.
Mr. Morrissey.
Mr. Morrissey.
Mr. Robillard.
Monsieur Robillard.
Madame Shanahan.
Madame Shanahan.
Mr. Sorbera.
Mr. Sorbera.
Ms. Hefner.
Miss Hefner.
Mr. Chang.
Mr. Chang.
Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Rogers.
Ms. Yip.
Miss Yip.
Mr. Lewis Kitchener-Conestoga.
Mr. Lewis Kitchener-Conestoga.
Madame Mendez.
Madame Mendez.
Mr. Baines.
Mr. Baines.
Ms. Bradford.
What's up, Yosofat? How you doing? Same old shit, different day. We had a week off of question period, and the scripts were barely rewritten. They're still talking about the same stuff, more or less. I don't even know what we're voting on right now, because I was talking earlier, opposed to paying attention. But it would look like it is going to be a unanimous across-the-board yes. So, I don't know. Maybe something to do with the SDTC. Maybe something else.
Mr. Cooper.
Mr. Cooper.
Mr. Kmitch.
Mr. Kmitch.
Mr. Couric.
Mr. Couric.
Mr. Small.
Mr. Small.
Mr. Beltud.
Monsieur Berthold.
Mr. Workington.
Mr. Workington.
Mr. Aboutayev.
Mr. Aboutayev.
Mrs. Kuzi.
Mrs. Kuzi.
Mr. Seaback.
Mr. Seaback.
Ms. Ferrari.
Ms. Ferrari.
Mr. Lloyd.
Mr. Lloyd.
Mr. Brassard.
Mr. Brassard.
Well, to be honest with you, I was hoping that they would eventually just redo the entire House of Commons, give us a massive, like, walkout runway with a Jumbotron behind it, some pyrotechnics and stuff. Like, let's actually turn this into a circus. Let's make this like WWE, UFC. We might as well at this point, because it's just as entertaining, and nothing really gets accomplished. So yeah, it's kind of just a big joke at the end of the day. So they might as well just go all in, right? Give Greg like a big golden throne or something that has like lights shining off of it. You know, have Pierre and Trudeau stand on like massive podiums in an octagon ring or something. I don't know, man. It like, been doing this for a few months now, covering question period, and it's gotten to the point where they have been talking about the SDTC for over a month. It's going to be close to 2 months. Once December hits, it'll be a 2-month straight debate over this failure to produce documents, and the documents that were produced, everything was redacted in them. So any information that could have been incriminating or whatever, alleged this, alleged that, it's not even there because it's all gone. It's all blacked out. We have scandal after scandal appear. We have issues, very active issues right now in our country, and they're just playing games. They're running around in circles. They're repeating the same things week after week, day after day, while Canadians, over 2 million, suffering, starving. People have issues trying to go and get health care. Whatever the case is right now in our country, it's a joke. It's a nightmare. The carbon tax, literally jacking up the price of everything as we know it. And they just continue to lie. They sit there and they smile. They vote. They say they're for Canadians and for the people. But we are still playing the exact same games we were probably years ago. Probably years ago. If you go back and watch a question period from a couple years back, guarantee you it's the same goddamn thing.
Mr. Desjardins.
Ms. Kwan.
Ms. Kwan.
Ms. May Saanich Gulf Islands.
Ms. May Saanich Gulf Islands.
Mr. Morris.
Mr. Morris.
All those opposed to the sub-amendment will please rise.
So if I had to guess, they're voting on some privilege here with the SDTC, the failure to produce the documents. It looks like it was a across-the-board yes on the vote. Now we have the electronic vote, and here you get to see the roster of every single MP, every individual in the seat representing their party. This is why I say, like, they need to just fully lean into the theatrics, because this is what you would see during a football game. You would see the entire lineup. You would see their position. You know, all that kind of stuff. Their number and everything. It's a fucking meme. It's an absolute joke. It's crazy, Wendy. Stall tactics. Yeah, it is stall tactics. That's what it feels like. When they sit there and they constantly just repeat the same things over and over again. They get a week in between question period to, I guess, either come up with something new or try to fix the issues at hand, and they're still debating the exact same things. Poor Fergus, is he crying? Get him a box of Kleenex. He very well might have been. I like that comment you made earlier of rewiring the mute button to shock him whenever he presses it. Thought that was kind of funny. Actually, speaking of Jagmeet, I did not see him today in the House of Commons. Jagmeet was missing in action. Probably for the better, but he was not here today. Pizza and beer, they agree on something. Yeah, just let's get a giant Domino's pizza or Pizza Hut in the House of Commons. Let's allow bystanders or viewers or an attendance to arrive and view the insanity. I think you can, actually, if you really wanted to. There are seats above their seats, which I think you can go and view what is happening. Don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that's what those seats above are for. Hope everybody is having a fantastic day or night, depending on where you are from. We are currently waiting for the electronic voting period to end. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that like button, hit that sub button. I do cover question period and House of Commons every single day it is live. We take a look. Oh, we lost the feed briefly there. If we take a look at the schedule, we are on the final stretch. Today is the 18th. We'll have a week of question period, followed by another week, followed by another week, and another week, and then 2 days. And then it will be Christmas break. We go into the 2025 schedule. Most of January will be vacant, and then they will start up again in the end of January and through February. Obviously, this is the schedule for 2025, but looking at the end capping of the year here, pretty good stuff. Pretty good stuff. We have a few weeks left, so some craziness could happen during those times. And we have lost the CPAC feed for the 9th time now today. If you guys are not aware, the CPAC site has been having a lot of issues. I'm not entirely sure why, but it has gone down numerous times. There we go. It's back now. Randy will pick it up, but deny he did, lol. Yeah. Crazy Randy. The Randy scandal. Randall scandal. Send the house pizza just to let them know the people are watching them. Yeah. Yep. The people are watching. The taxpayer dollars are going towards a stream they can barely keep up. Shout out to that. Shout out. Will be the same repeat and repeat for 4 weeks. Yeah, you're probably right. You're probably absolutely correct. Yeah, the Randall scandal. Nice they can't do telecom. We can show them. I have no idea. I have no idea what's going on over there. I'm actually surprised that we even get a live feed and Trudeau just isn't shutting everybody out. Okay, we got 40 seconds left here on the electronic voting time, and then we get to, I guess, go right back into House of Commons proceedings. We get to finish off what they started. Might stick around for a little bit of that. Might see what's going on there. I really need to behave and stop picking on them. Ah, man. Your tax dollars are going towards them. I think we have the right to pick on them. If you want my honest opinion, especially when they're doing a really piss poor job. Yeah, yeah, I think you have the right to pick on them a little bit. You have to get tickets from an MP to use the visitors gallery. Really? So you can't just like show up, get a security check, and then walk in, huh? That's kind of crazy. I said this before. They should have a day every 2 weeks or a day every month where actual Canadian citizens line up and ask legitimate, unpre-written or pre-screened questions. They go in and they actually ask, what the hell are you guys doing? Because it's a whole lot of not good. And obviously, to some extent, they could be silenced or muted or whatever if they get a little out of touch or out of hand, right? You have random people walking in saying what they please. Yeah, I probably would get a little crazy. But that's what you want. You want authentic questions. You want authentic people trying to figure out what's happening. You don't want the government to give pre-screened questions. That would be stupid. So, I don't know. That's what I think. I think they should do something like that where the people actually come in and they can poke and prod as much as they please. Make it an hour. Make it a couple hours. I don't know. That's just me, though. Right now, it is muted. We're waiting for Greg to unmute the stream, or whoever. The vote was passed, a unanimous vote across the board. 319 said yes to get this sub-amendment through to the failure for the SDTC documents to be provided, produced, whatever the hell is going on now. Greg, please unmute the stream. I can only ramble for so long. Routine proceedings, tabling of documents has begun. Like I said, I'm going to stream for a little bit longer, not too much longer, maybe like 10, 15 minutes. We'll see what's going on here. I'm a little bit more curious, especially with the way the routine proceedings ended before question period. They were getting into the woodworks there, as you could say. We will vote. We will vote on it. Point of order. Where the pizza, Randy? I don't know what's going on here. We need an unmute of the CPAC. That would be fantastic. There we go.
Order. Her Excellency, the Governor-General transmits to the House of Commons the Supplementary Estimates B of sums required to defray expenses of the Federal Public Administration for the fiscal year ending on March 31st, 2025, and...
I don't see... The CPAC stream has been having so many issues, I just refreshed it and the volume started coming through and it was unmuted the whole time. So I don't know what's going on with the website today. It's been running very poorly.
Her Excellency, the Governor-General of Canada, submits to the House the Supplementary Estimates B for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2025, and pursuant to the Constitution Act of 1867, Section 54, recommends this budget to the House of Commons as signed by the Governor-General. The supplementary budget of 2024-2025, I table this in the House.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to Standing Order 36.8a, I have the honour to table in both official languages the government's responses to 37 petitions. These returns will be tabled in an electronic format.
All right, it appears Greg is stepping out, and we are still tabling documents. So I think I'm just going to call it here, guys. Thank you all for joining. I will be live tomorrow, roughly the same time, covering this. The circus continues. The madness does not end here in Canada as long as Trudeau is in power and the Liberal government continues to lie through their teeth like they have been for the past 10 years. Once again, thank you all for coming by, stopping by, hitting the like button, hitting the sub button, even if you just watched for a bit, or a returning viewer or a new viewer, whoever you are, thank you for spending your time here with me. You could be anywhere else in the world or in your day-to-day life. I will see you all tomorrow. Have a great rest of your days.
Miss Glad.